Hey, sleepy minds. I'm the sleepwalking historian, where history drifts like dreams. Tonight's tale might just lull you to sleep. But first, don't forget to follow for more bedtime journeys through the past. Hey guys, tonight we sink our feet into the warm dust of southern Mesopotamia, where the rivers whisper and the reeds sway. You're not alone out here. Marching beside you are dozens of tired, sunburnt men with copper-tipped spears, linen belts, and the kind of sandals that practically melt into the mud. Your arms ache from carrying a crude leather shield all day, and there's something suspiciously alive crawling in your boot. But no one's turning back that you're a conscripted farmer turned warrior, probably against your will, trudging through the dawn of civilization's first known military experiments. The cities of Sumer, scattered like fallen bricks across the land, are waking up not just to trade and temples, but to war.so. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time is over there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in the middle of a cracked dirt plain between two city-states that used to be trading partners, until some priest accused the other of stealing water rights, which in Sumer is like accusing someone of stealing your soul. There are no uniforms here, just varying levels of sweaty, anxious men with sticks trying to look brave. The smell? A mix of roasted barley, river rot, and nervous stomachs. You glance over your captain. He's not what you'd call a career warrior. He was a potter last week. His helmet is just a woven dome smeared with black bitumen, probably more useful against sunstroke than a blow to the head. The only real weapon he has is confidence, and maybe a mild concussion. This is the infancy of organized warfare. There are no standing armies yet, no professional legions, just clusters of dudes with grudges and very primitive gear. The term war machine might be generous. What you're looking at is more like an angry PDA meeting that's gotten out of hand. Still, it's the beginning of something important. These early campaigns, awkward, disorganized, occasionally just large-scale shoving contests, mark the shift from random village raiding to planned, strategic-ish warfare. Historians still argue whether these early conflicts were truly military operations or just economic tantrums disguised as divine missions. The truth is probably both. You can't exactly separate religion, economics, and ego here. You and your fellow soldiers have walked for 2 days in open heat, eating stale flatbread and drinking what might generously be called river-filtered water. You don't have tents, just blankets if you're lucky. Most men just curl up behind their shields at night and hope the mosquitoes aren't carnivorous. Spoiler, some are. You pass a monument, a crude wooden post with a clay plaque warning trespassers. The inscription is one of the first things you learn to squint at. This land is under the protection of Ningirsu. Trespass and you will be struck down. It's not subtle. It's also not legally binding. The plan is to strike first and sort the gods out later. Sumer city-states aren't nations as we know them. Each one is its own miniature kingdom, with a temple at its heart and a ruler who might call himself Lugal, Big Man, or Ensi, depending on how humble he feels that morning. Each city claims its local deity is the most powerful. Naturally, they fight a lot, especially when river control and farming boundaries are on the line. Your sandals kick up hot silt as you approach the edge of enemy territory. Scouts say the rival city's forces are digging in near a canal bend, strategic for irrigation and, therefore, sacred. You don't have binoculars or even decent eyesight after days in the glare. You squint into the heat waves like you're trying to see through soup. A few men mutter prayers under their breath, not necessarily because they're pious, but because they're scared. You pretend not to notice that your knees are shaking. One guy offers to trade a pig for a better spear. Another offers a cousin. You don't ask follow-up questions. There's no military chain of command in the modern sense. Orders come down from the temple or the palace or some guy shouting louder than everyone else. You're told to advance with courage, which translates roughly to walk forward until something bad happens. You march past the remains of a battlefield from last year, a scattering of broken tools, bones, and faded flags. It's unclear whether the flags were official or just decorative tablecloths nailed to sticks. Either way, the memory lingers. You can feel it. The dust here smells different, like someone else's fear that never left. Somewhere in your group is a guy who swears he saw the war god Ninurta in the sky once. Said he flew overhead during a thunderstorm and promised victory. That same guy also once ate a hallucinogenic root by accident, so you take it with a grain of salt. Or if you're Sumerian, with a pinch of fermented date syrup. Still, everyone listens. War stories are already becoming part of the culture. They'll be carved into temple walls, molded into clay tablets, whispered at night around hearths. It's not about whether they're true. It's about whether they're good that they you bed down near a dried-up irrigation trench. You look up at the sky and think, maybe this is history. Or maybe it's just what happens when farmers get bored and kings get petty. Either way, tomorrow, you might have to poke someone with a spear and pretend you know what you're doing. And the worst part? Your feet are definitely going to blister. You wake up to a goat bleeding and the unmistakable squelch of someone stepping in something that was definitely not mud. Around you, men are groaning, stretching, and cursing quietly in Sumerian. Basically the same sounds you'd hear outside a cheap hostel bathroom. The sun's just peeking over the horizon, painting the cracked earth gold, but it brings no comfort. Today, you'll march toward a city that was once your trade partner and now wants to skewer you over barley quotas. The city in question could be Elma, could be Lagash, could be both. Because like two toddlers fighting over a toy, these cities squabble over every inch of land between them, especially the fertile border zones. And this isn't some vague feud either. They literally have maps carved in stone tablets with annotations like property of the god Ningirsu and do not plow past this line or else. You trudge forward, passing the outlines of abandoned watch posts. Some are just piles of reed mats. Others have proper mud brick bases, signs that someone tried to defend this land before. You wonder if they're still around. You hope not, because if you meet them, it probably won't be for tea. The cities of Sumer are not just towns. They're living, breathing fortresses of power, with ziggurats towering over marketplaces and every street humming with whispers of divine favor. They all claim their gods love them best, and their kings are chosen by those gods. It's like a political campaign, except instead of slogans, they use sacred bulls and ritual chants. And if the gods seem silent, well, a war victory is basically their way of breaking the tie. Lagash, for instance, claims Ningirsu as its war god, patron of thunder and righteous violence. On the other hand, bows to Shera, who's a bit more chill, but apparently just as territorial. You get the feeling the gods themselves might not care that much, but the priests? Oh, the priests absolutely do. And that means everyone else does, too. Historians still debate whether these cities truly had long-term strategies or were just reacting emotionally to every slight. From your current position, sweaty, itchy, and carrying a spear with a suspicious wobble, you'd bet on emotional. One wrong word from a rival city's ambassador, and suddenly you're sleeping in a trench with 6 other dudes and no breakfast. As you approach the city outskirts, the signs of wealth are obvious. Thick irrigation canals, tidy rows of barley, and oxen that haven't skipped a meal in years. This is not just a war over honor. This is a turf war over survival. Whoever controls more canals gets more crops. More crops mean more trade. More trade means more bribes for priests. It's the divine circle of power. You see merchants carting away valuables, clay jars sealed and stacked, textiles bundled, and even a few bronze tools tucked carefully underarm. War doesn't just inconvenience these cities. It rattles the whole economic engine. A few missed planting seasons and the granaries start echoing. Then there's the politics. The king, your Lugal, is probably already composing victory inscriptions in his head. If the campaign goes well, he'll commission a scribe to record the whole glorious affair. If it goes badly, well, silence is also a form of record-keeping. In Umma and Lagash, the temple and palace are often indistinguishable. The king may rule, but it's the high priest who controls the city's mood. The omens, the rituals, the festivals, they all feed into the machinery of war. When a king says the gods demand justice, what he often means is, I'm tired of pretending we're not angry. The rivalry is centuries old. That's not an exaggeration. Some of the earliest known written texts, like the Umm-Lagash border treaties, read like passive-aggressive sticky notes from one city to another. Please stop encroaching on the Guadina fields, or we will summon Ningirsu again. Subtext: try us. We dare you. In this world, borders aren't fixed lines, they're sacred thresholds. That canal you're walking beside, it might have divine status. The farmland? Officially gifted to the gods. So every footstep across it isn't just trespass, it's heresy. You're not invading, you're blaspheming. How's that for pressure? The stakes are bigger than your aching feet. These city-states aren't just fighting for land, they're fighting for legitimacy. Every win becomes a cosmic endorsement. Every loss, a divine snub. And no king wants to be known as the guy whose god ghosted him mid-battle. You arrive near the enemy perimeter, setting up makeshift defenses, mostly wicker screens and piles of stones. The mood is tense, but oddly casual. One soldier is chewing reeds and humming. Another is doodling something obscene in the dust. A third is seriously considering defecting, but remembers his cousin lives in the enemy city. Tough luck, a scout returns with news. The rival army is assembling just across the next canal. They're about 300 strong, about the same as your force. That doesn't comfort anyone. You all know that in this kind of war, numbers mean less than nerves. Whoever breaks first loses. You can see the glint of copper weapons across the water. No steel yet, no iron. Just hammered copper that dents more easily than your pride. Still, It's better than being clubbed with a farming tool, which you're told happen a lot. Then someone sneezes loudly, and for a brief moment, you all laugh. Because even at the edge of a battle, human absurdity shows up. It's a sneeze that punctures the tension like a reed popping a wineskin. You lie down that night beneath the stars, the ziggurat of your city faint in the distance, lit by torches and the occasional god chant. You don't sleep much. There's a frog croaking nearby, and you're pretty sure it's not metaphorical. You think of the other side, those men with different accents, praying to different gods, but probably just as tired, just as itchy, and just as annoyed by frogs. You'll face them soon, but for now, you stare at the stars and wonder how cities that worship creation gods became so good at destruction. Morning breaks with the soft clink of copper and the dry groan of another too early wake up. The air still holds that cool hush before the sun rises like a furnace lid, and you savor it. Because in a few hours, the battlefield will feel like a frying pan made of clay and bad decisions. You gather with your fellow soldiers, rubbing sleep from your eyes and stretching muscles that were never meant for war. You all shuffle toward a makeshift plaza near the command tent. Or, let's be honest, a slightly bigger reed hut with fancier clay tokens on the table. That's where they keep the maps. Or, rather, carved clay tiles vaguely shaped like rivers and hills, which someone insists are definitely strategic. But today isn't just about standing around pretending to understand military plans. Today, you're being shown something sacred, something terrifying, something called the standard of UR, that it's not really a standard, not in the modern military sense. More like an elaborately decorated box, carried into ceremonial processions and possibly warfare. Though historians still argue whether it was actually brought in a battle or was just waved around by priests looking important. Either way, it's a flashy mosaic covered in bits of lapis lazuli, shell, and red limestone. Very sparkly, very ominous. You walk up with the others, staring at the panels that depict two worlds, peace and war. The peace side shows a royal banquet, a calm procession of servants carrying fish, wine, and other goodies. People smile politely. You briefly wonder if it's just ancient propaganda. Look how chill we are when not murdering people. Then there's the war side that's the one getting all the attention today. Rows of spearmen march in tight formation, tighter than yours will probably ever be. Chariots roll across the field, pulled by what might generously be called donkeys with ambition. And you can see a king, tall, stiff, larger than life, standing among prisoners. Some of them are naked. Some are bleeding. One is definitely stepping on his pride, that it's stylized, sure. No one in real life probably stood that still or had that perfect posture during battle. But it sends a message. This is what victory looks like. Uniforms, order, dominance. And you? You're expected to deliver the sequel. You overhear an officer, again, a fancy word for guy with a louder voice and a shinier axe, explaining that the standard proves your city has a legacy of military glory. That you're walking in the footsteps of ancient victors. That you should be proud. You try to be. Really. But the standard, while beautiful, also feels like a warning. Like a glossy movie poster for a horror film where everyone pretends they're the hero until things go sideways. You shuffle back to your tent and talk quietly with a few others. One guy says the standard was found in a royal tomb. buried with soldiers and a king who all died together. Another swears he heard that the thing was cursed, that anyone who touched it would dream of blood for 7 nights straight. The same guy also says he saw a demon in a grain bin once. So again, grain of salt. Still, it's hard not to feel a chill. And maybe that's the point. The mosaic isn't just art. It's ideology. It says, we've done this before. We'll do it again. We're a machine. Get in line or get run over. But reality? That's Messier. You glance at the men next to you. One's missing a sandal. Another is trying to sharpen a dull spear with a rock and a lot of optimism. This isn't an army. It's a crowd with matching headaches. Historians still debate whether the standard of UR represents a real army or an idealized one. Some argue it's nothing more than a symbolic piece, designed to intimidate enemies or impress visiting traders. Others believe it reflects the actual structure of Sumerian military might, showcasing a formation of elites with ranks, equipment, and discipline. You believe it's 50% fact, 50% wishful thinking, and 100% heavy to carry as the sun climbs. You're told to line up. Not in parade formation like the mosaic, more like a disorganized soup of sandals and elbows. But you try your best. The priests walk past, mumbling blessings and sprinkling sacred water that smells suspiciously like yesterday's canal runoff. You nod respectfully anyway. Can't hurt. Then, from behind the temple cart, the elders wheel out a replica of the standard. Not the real one, that's tucked away in a treasury somewhere, guarded by snakes or accountants. But this one is close enough. It catches the light, and for a moment you believe. You really do. You believe you're part of something ancient and glorious. You believe your spear might matter. You believe your name might end up on a clay tablet someday. Not as a debtor or a grain thief, but as a soldier. The image lingers in your mind. The chariots rolling forward, the prisoners lined up, the king standing tall. You can almost hear the victory chants echoing through time. Almost. Then someone sneezes again, louder this time. Another man curses because his water skin sprung a leak. The illusion breaks. Reality returns. You're just you again, tired, dusty, slightly underfed, but not entirely alone. The drums begin their low, steady beat. It's time to march. As you shoulder your gear and start walking, you glance one last time at the mosaic. The king still stands tall. The prisoners still cower. The spearmen still move in perfect rhythm. You, however, nearly trip over a rock and pretend you meant to do that. Your feet ache before the first mile, and you're already regretting not stealing that second pair of sandals from camp. The road, or rather, a strip of churned up dirt bordered by withered reeds, winds toward the enemy city. Your squad grumbles quietly, but the mood shifts when someone notices a priest walking beside the column, carrying a basket of clay tablets strapped to a wooden frame. That means one thing: it's time to make history. Literally. You squint at the priest, and he squints back, clearly unimpressed by your uneven helmet. He holds up a tablet and begins reading aloud, voice booming with ceremonial drama. In the name of Ningirsu, slayer of chaos, bringer of irrigation, our mighty King Eonatum has declared this campaign blessed. You can't help but notice the dramatic pauses he inserts. He's enjoying this a little too much. The priest continues with tales of your king's past glorious battles, including one where 10,000 foes fell beneath his chariot. That seems optimistic. especially considering there probably weren't even 10,000 people in the region at the time. Historians still argue whether these numbers were symbolic, mistranslated, or just the world's first examples of creative accounting. And yet, everyone around you listens with glazed awe. Because when you hear that your king is protected by gods and your enemies are worm-hearted traitors to the divine order, it's easier to forget that your backup spear is literally just a sharpened stick. You pass by a clay wall with old carvings, half erased by weather and goat hooves. These inscriptions tell a different story. One shows a line of prisoners being marched back into the city, their hands bound, their heads bowed. Another shows a king, possibly yours, possibly a rival, crushing an enemy underfoot. Literally, his sandal is oversized and his expression somewhere between bored and smug that you're told this is justice. You're told that writing these brag tablets is as important as the fighting itself. A battle unwritten might as well have never happened. And so, even now, the scribes trail behind your column, scratching notes on a wet clay. Every skirmish, every casualty, every dropped helmet, recorded, or at least interpreted. That's how war works in Sumer. The fighting is physical, yes, but the glory? That lives in cuneiform. You remember hearing about a king, Mebrejezi of Kish, if you can pronounce that without spitting, who supposedly reigned over lands far beyond the plains. His name appears in the earliest royal lists. But was he real? Did he conquer or just outlast? No one's sure, but he's remembered. And in this place, that's everything as your boots sink into the soft sludge of a canal crossing. You wonder how much of what gets written today will still be read in 100 years. Or 1,000. Will someone dig up a clay shard and say, "Ah yes, the brave spearmen of Lagash who slipped in the mud and accidentally flanked themselves"? Because let's be honest, you've seen battle reports before. You once saw a clay tablet that claimed the gods personally turned the arrows of the enemy mid-air. Very inspiring, slightly implausible, but no one questioned it. Scribes are chosen carefully in Sumer. They trained for years to learn cuneiform, shaping those little wedge marks into verbs, victories, and very convenient exaggerations. They're not warriors, but they hold power. Their version of events becomes the version of events. And if your king wants to be remembered as taller, braver, and somehow always winning, well, that's just good politics. You trudge past a monument known as the Boundary Stone of Umma, or as your side calls it, that lying rock. It's a thick pillar with angry inscriptions claiming divine ownership of a fertile strip of land. Your priest insists the inscription was altered, misread, or possibly forged. The other side says the same about your boundary stone. Historians still debate which stone came first, or if both were planted retroactively after someone already started a war. You pass through another village, this one abandoned, the doors flapping loosely in the wind, pots cracked and half buried in the dust. No corpses, but the silence is louder than screams. You're told they fled before the war began, fearing conscription or pillage. You don't blame them that ASU break for a short rest. The priest continues reading from another tablet. This time, it's a letter from the king to the people of Lagash. It says the gods have granted him the right to restore balance and punish the treachery of Umma. You wonder how many of these letters are actually written by the king and how many are drafted by scribes who've never left the temple steps. Still, the performance works. Your fellow soldiers nod along. A few even cheer. One man mutters, "If the gods said so, who are we to question?" You decide not to answer that one out loud. Then the priest brings out a newer tablet. This one's not for reading yet. It's blank, soft, waiting. He holds it out toward the sun and says, "Today we make history." And everyone cheers again, even though none of you know if making history means victory or just another footnote. You look around and realize something. The real weapon here might not be the spear or the axe. It might be the scribe, the clay tablet, the narrative, because after the battle, after the blood dries and the fields are replanted, someone will write it all down. And they'll decide who was brave, who was chosen, who was righteous. And if they're very good at their job, no one will remember it differently. The March resumes. You catch one last glimpse of the tablet basket swaying behind the priest. There are dozens of blank ones in there, each one waiting to tell a story. Maybe yours. Hopefully not the part where you slipped on goat dung and dropped your helmet. The mid-afternoon sun hits like a personal insult. You've wrapped your head in a strip of linen to soak up the sweat, but it's doing little to stop the trickles running down your spine. As the line of warriors stops to regroup near a dried-up irrigation ditch, someone starts passing around clay mugs of beer. Not the good, frothy kind, but the gritty, lukewarm brew reserved for people who might die soon. You sit beside your weapon, turning it over in your hands. A copper axe, barely sharpened, attached to a wooden handle bound with rawhide. Not exactly Excalibur. The edge is chipped, the balance is off, and if you swing too hard, it might just fling itself into the next field. Still, it's yours. You named it Mosquito Biter, not because it kills mosquitoes, but because so far that's its deadliest confirmed target that you're not alone in your underwhelming arsenal. Across the line, you see spears made from reworked farming tools, knives that were once fish hooks, and a surprising number of weapons that look suspiciously like gardening implements. This is the Sumerian war machine, a phrase that might be overselling it. It's more like a strongly worded threat backed by enthusiastic plumbing supplies. Historians still argue whether Sumerian armies were formally equipped by the state or expected to bring their own tools. Evidence from grave goods and temple records suggests it was a bit of both. Professional soldiers got copper and helmets, while conscripts brought whatever was sharp and pointy in the shed. You're a conscript. The only reason your axe isn't rusting is because it's barely been used. Then there's the helmets. Yours is a reed cap covered in sticky black bitumen, which smells like roasted nightmares in this heat. It supposedly hardens like resin, forming a protective dome. You're skeptical. You knock gently on the crown. It makes a sad little thonk. You try not to take it personally. Meanwhile, the officer pacing in front of the line wears an actual copper helmet, which gleams menacingly, mostly because he has someone whose full-time job is to polish it. He also has a round shield made of wood with a copper boss, and a tunic with reinforced stitching that probably cost more than your hut. He stops beside you and gestures at your axe. Well balanced, he lies. You nod, because agreeing is safer than arguing. Beside you, an older man is wrapping strips of leather around his legs. Stops the snakes, he mutters, as though this is a completely normal part of battle prep. You eye the ground nervously. No one mentions snakes, and let's talk about shields. The rich boys get wooden ones covered in cowhide. The rest of you use wicker and hope for the best. Some soldiers carry no shield at all, trusting agility, divine favor, or sheer denial to keep them safe. There's also the matter of armor. Sumerians weren't exactly rocking full body protection. A few elites might wear cloaks studded with bronze discs or layered linen vests that offer some resistance to glancing blows. The rest of you are basically fighting in skirts. Yes, skirts. The official term is kilted tunic, but there's no denying it. You and everyone else are going into battle with your knees out and your dignity trailing behind. As you stand, adjusting your gear, a few of the soldiers begin smearing oil across their forearms and legs. It's not a spa treatment. It's to help prevent weapons from sticking if someone tries to grab you mid-scuffle. One man adds ash to the oil for spirit protection, another just because it looks cool. Nearby, a younger recruit is crying quietly. No one says anything. You all remember your first campaign. Fear tastes like metal and dust, and some of you were it better than others that a priest arrives, waving a palm frond soaked in something pungent, and mutters a blessing over your weapons. May Ninurta guide your blow. You nod solemnly, though part of you wonders if Ninurta even keeps track of all these part-time warriors. You glance over at the carts carrying spare weapons. Some of them are so misshapen they look like modern art. One has a handle that's clearly been reattached 5 times with glue, twine, and what might be a dog tooth. Another is bent in a way that would make any decent axe head weep. The chariot drivers are doing final checks, tightening ropes and wiping down harnesses. The chariots themselves are more like heavy wooden carts with 2 solid wheels. They rattle, they creak, and they tip if the ground isn't flat. And they're not pulled by horses, because those haven't made it to Sumer yet. No, these are onagers, wild donkeys with bad attitudes and no interest in teamwork. You watch as one chariot lurches forward during a test run and immediately flips into a canal. No one is injured, but everyone claps politely. It's a good omen, apparently. Or at least, not a bad one, that's Warren Sumer. It's half ritual, half improvisation. A lot of sweat, a little blood, and the ever-present hope that someone else gets hit first. And yet, despite the clumsy tools and the laughable armor, these early warriors did something incredible. They took farming implements and turned them into instruments of politics. They created formations, drilled occasionally, and marched with a purpose. Even if the gear was basic, the intent was revolutionary. For the first time in human history, war was more than a village raid. It was becoming an institution. Still, you can't help but think, if someone hits you hard enough on the head, your helmet might just collapse like wet bread. So you make a quiet pact with mosquito biter. 1 solid swing, maybe 2, and then a strategic retreat. Or, as your captain calls it, aggressive repositioning. The horn sounds. Time to line up again. You sigh, adjust your kilt, and try to look dangerous. The ground rumbles faintly beneath your feet. You think it's thunder, until the noise sharpens into rhythmic clatter and the distant snort of something breathing hard and angry. You turn, and there it is, the pride of your army, rolling out from behind the reed curtain of the staging area to the chariot. Okay, maybe pride is too generous, and rolling is more of a stagger, but it's definitely a chariot, or at least a 2-wheeled cart lashed together with wood, rope, and desperation. The wheels are solid discs, not spokes. No springs, no suspension. Riding in one is basically volunteering for back problems. It's pulled not by horses because, sorry, horses are still chilling in the steppes somewhere, but by onagers, half-wild donkey-like creatures with powerful legs, short tempers, and the emotional stability of a badly rested toddler. And there's more than one that you squint into the heat haze and count 4 chariots in total. Not exactly an armada, but impressive by Sumerian standards. Most city-states could barely field one. Owning a chariot meant wealth. Using one in battle meant serious flexing. You watch as a driver hops aboard and grabs the reins. Beside him stand a second man, the warrior, balancing on the plank floor with his spear raised. Both look incredibly proud and incredibly uncomfortable. The onagers start forward, dragging the cart at a jolting trot. You wince as the entire thing bounces over a root and nearly pitches both men into the dirt. Still, there's no denying it. These awkward carts are the ancestors of ancient mobility. They're fast-ish, loud, and when aimed properly, terrifying. Historians still argue about what role chariots played in these early wars. Some think they were used mainly for transport, zipping important officers around the battlefield. Others suggest they were more for shock and awe, like ancient tanks, though that's generous, considering they toppled over at the first sharp turn that you're told that in the city of Uruk, a chariot once rode straight through a crowd of enemy skirmishers and scattered them like barley chaff. Then again, the guy telling the story was also high on fermented fig syrup, so maybe don't carve that in stone just yet. Your captain claims the chariots are the cutting edge of military progress. You're not sure whether he means that literally, because one just clipped a spear rack, or figuratively. Either way, it's hard to argue when the wheels alone probably took a dozen craftsmen to make. You get a closer look at one when it stops nearby for a quick inspection. The frame is built of wood, fastened with pegs and rawhide lashings. Every creak sounds like a prayer. The platform is barely large enough for 2 people to stand on, and there's no railing, just balance, faith, and luck. The warrior on board wears a reinforced leather tunic studded with bronze. Fancy. The driver? Just a simple kilt and a nervous expression. The onagers, meanwhile, chew their bits and swish their tails like they're ready to go rogue at any moment. The officer points at you. Help steady that wheel. You rush forward and grip the side just as the cart lurches again. Your back screams and the wheel groans. You don't say it aloud, but you're quietly amazed this thing hasn't collapsed into kindling already. Still, when it's rolling on a flat surface, at least, it's intimidating. It raises dust. It thunders across the earth. And if it's pointed toward you, well, it doesn't need to be graceful. It just needs to scare the sand out of your skirt. You ask one of the handlers what the plan is for using them in the battle. He shrugs and says, "Go fast, shout a lot, and try not to flip." You nod solemnly like this is a well-developed tactic. Some scholars believe these early chariots were copied, or at least inspired, by designs from northern Mesopotamia or the Iranian plateau. There are theories about cultural diffusion, shared trade routes, or just that one guy who saw a card and thought, what if I put a spear guy in this? The fact that Sumerians even managed to use wheels in warfare is impressive, considering they invented the wheel just a few centuries earlier. You imagine the first war cart must have been an experimental disaster. Probably involved a few bruised egos and a lost priest. You spend the afternoon helping reinforce the axle of one cart with an extra strip of leather. The driver thanks you by offering a dried figure. You accept it and immediately regret it. It's like chewing on sandal leather dipped in old syrup. Still, it's better than whatever that last ration was. You hope that as the sun dips low, the chariots begin practice runs. Each one rolls in a loose arc, trailing dust behind it and sending pebbles skittering into nearby ditches. The warriors on board practice thrusting their spears at bundles of straw set up like scarecrows. One accidentally knocks over a shrine offering. Everyone pretends not to notice, and then, for a brief moment, you understand the appeal. When the chariot surges forward, when the wheels thunder, the driver yells, the dust rises. It's like watching war itself take shape. Not elegant, not stable, but alive, furious, forward-moving. You wonder what the enemy will think when they see these coming. Will they panic? Run? Laugh? You suspect it'll be all three at night falls. The chariots are returned to their shelters. The onagers rubbed down with oil and whispered to like sacred animals. You lie on your blanket and close your eyes, but you can still hear the echo of wheels in the distance. In your dreams, you're standing in a chariot, holding a spear, wind in your face, until one of the onagers kicks and the whole thing tips sideways into a barley field. You jolt awake. Maybe you'll stick to walking. Dawn creeps across the plains like a suspicious rumor, slow, deliberate, and a little too quiet. You wake to the sound of flint scraping against steel as someone nearby tries to light a cooking fire. The smoke wafts low over the camp, blending with the fog that clings to the canals. It smells like damp reeds and half-burned lentils. You sit up, groggy, and feel the ache in your hips from sleeping on packed dirt. Someone's snoring behind you, probably the guy who talks in his sleep about wrestling divine bulls. Another man is already doing push-ups, trying to summon strength from Minerva's core. You decide to summon strength from your breakfast instead, which turns out to be a barley cake with the consistency of roof tile that a low horn moans through the haze. You know that sound. It's time to form ranks. You join the others in a slow shuffle toward the assembly area, passing rows of weapons being checked, chariots being retied with fresh rope, and priests dabbing ash on warriors' foreheads in the shape of lightning bolts. That's supposed to represent the gods' favor. It mostly looks like someone smudged charcoal with their thumb. The commander climbs atop a cart to deliver the day's briefing. He's already yelling, though you're not sure anyone can actually hear him clearly. His voice bounces around in the fog like a lost goose. Today, we take the canal bend. Today, we push them from the barley fields. Today, we restore balance. You're about to mutter something sarcastic when he adds, "We will show them the net of Ningirsu." Everyone quiets. That phrase? That's serious business. The net of Ningirsu is not a metaphor, it's an actual net. According to temple myth, Ningirsu, the patron god of war and agriculture for the city of Lagash, wields a divine net in battle. A shimmering, inescapable mesh woven from storm winds and divine order. He throws it over enemies, tangling their limbs and crushing their resistance. Priests say it's how he captured monsters, rebels, and even rival gods that you've seen a depiction of it once on a temple relief. Jagged lines crossing over frantic limbs, like a fishing trap from hell. Of course, that's a god's version. The human version? It's a literal net, like with knots and fibers. And today, they're bringing it out. A group of temple assistants arrives, carrying a huge woven net coiled in layers. It smells faintly of mildew and ritual incense. They unroll it in the middle of the staging area while a priest chants a hymn in a voice that cracks every third word, that you're told it's been blessed for entanglement, which sounds like something a romanticon artist might say. But here it's deadly serious. The idea is simple. Advance under cover of infantry and deploy the net to trip the front lines of the enemy. Break their formation, create chaos, and let your chariots and spearmen mop up the rest. The soldiers assigned to carry the net look skeptical. They're not elite troops. Just two nervous teenagers and a man who once claimed to be a melon farmer. They each grab a corner of the huge mesh and lift it awkwardly, staggering under its weight. You imagine trying to sprint across a battlefield holding a giant net while someone throws spears at you. Historians still argue whether the net of Ningirsu was actually used in real combat or just paraded as ritual intimidation. Some scholars think it was symbolic, waved around like a flag to invoke fear. Others believe it was deployed with the goal of tripping chariots or infantry, or even capturing high-value targets for public execution. Either way, today you're going to see it in action. The fog begins to lift as the sun climbs higher, revealing the glimmer of water channels to the east. Somewhere beyond those banks, the enemy is forming up. You can't see them yet, but you can feel them, like a pressure in the air, a change in rhythm. The horn sounds again. You move into position, shield wall to the front, chariots on the flanks, net squad behind the first rank. The strategy is clear. Hit hard, trap the front, then roll the chariots through the chaos. Simple, terrifying. You grip your axe, flex your fingers, and try to look like someone who isn't calculating the odds of hiding in a barley sack until this is over. The drums begin to beat, slow, heavy, like a giant heart thudding in anticipation. You march forward, the lines crunching over dried mud, sandals sticking occasionally in canal sludge. The net squad struggles to keep the mesh lifted, tangling it around their knees every few steps. The first glimpse of the enemy comes when you crest a low embankment, a row of spearmen with round shields, backed by archers and a few of their own chariots. You can't see their expressions, but you know they see yours. And they definitely see the net. A low murmur rolls through their ranks. The priest walks behind your formation, chanting louder now. He raises a staff carved with a lightning motif and shouts, "The net shall fall. The traitors shall tangle." You try to believe it. Then the sky fills with the WHHHFFF of incoming arrows. You drop into a crouch just in time as a sharp whistle passes your ear. The guy next to you isn't so lucky. His shield takes the hit, and he stares at it like it personally insulted his ancestors. The commander roars, "Advance!" You surge forward. The net bearers trip almost immediately. The thing folds in half, wraps around someone's leg, and one poor kid does a forward tumble so theatrical it might get written into tomorrow's war poem as a heroic sacrifice. But then, somehow, they untangle it. The net goes airborne. You don't even see the moment it lands, but suddenly, the front row of enemy infantry begins stumbling, yelling, falling into one another. It's working. It's actually working. The chariots crash in from the flanks. Dust explodes. You can barely see through the chaos, but the enemy lines are folding like wet papyrus. Your axe finds something solid. A shield? A shoulder? You don't look. You swing again. Shout. Step. Swing. And then, suddenly, it's over. Or at least, this part is. The enemy has pulled back toward the canal bridge. A few of their wounded are being dragged away. One chariot is spinning in circles with no driver, onagers frothing at the mouth. And the net, still tangled in a pile of groaning soldiers near the front, a few of them trying to chew their way out like angry goats. You fall back, panting, hands shaking. One of the net bearers limps past you, bleeding from the eyebrow, but grinning like he just outwitted the gods themselves. You can't help but smile back. Turns out, sometimes a net is mightier than the sword. You feel like someone's dropped a grain silo on your shoulders. Every muscle aches, your hands are raw from gripping the axe, and your mouth tastes like fear, sweat, and stale barley. But against all odds, you're still standing. The battlefield is a mess of footprints, fallen spears, broken shields, and dazed men trying to remember which direction home is. The sun is high now, baking everything beneath it. The dead lie still. The wounded moan. And the priests? They're already setting up incense burners and muttering about ritual cleansing. You don't get much time to process the fight. The officers are shouting for a regroup. You trudge toward the rally point, stepping over a man who is either unconscious or deeply committed to pretending. You leave him be as you pass by the ruins of the enemy's forward line. Something catches your eye. Not the net. It's still stretched across the dirt like a tragic laundry disaster, but a broken steel half buried near the canal edge. You nudge it with your foot at a fragment of black stone carved with cuneiform. Old, serious, part of a boundary marker, most likely. Maybe even from the original Lagash dispute over these fields. You crouch down and squint at the symbols. One name stands out, Eonatum, the same king your priest was ranting about 2 days ago. And suddenly, you remember the steel of the vultures. It's not here, not physically. This is just some broken cousin of it, but you've heard the stories. Carved to commemorate the great victory of Lagash over the steel of the vultures is legendary. A towering slab of limestone, filled with violent imagery. Rows of marching soldiers, the king crushing enemies underfoot, and most famously, vultures flying above the battlefield, each carrying off the heads of the defeated. You remember that part clearly. Your uncle once described it to you while eating stew, which ruined both your appetite and your dreams for 3 nights. According to the story, Eonatum of Lagash launched a brutal, God-sanctioned assault on driving their armies into retreat, reclaiming disputed land, and establishing himself as the divine warhammer of Ningirsu. The stele doesn't skimp on details, depicting soldiers in close formation, trampling bodies, and the king wielding a massive mace like he's auditioning for a divine smackdown. Historians still argue whether the stele of the vultures reflects literal events or just royal spin. Some say it's accurate battlefield documentation. Others believe it's stylized propaganda meant to scare enemies and impress the gods. The vultures? Probably a symbolic flourish, unless ancient birds were really that organized. Your captain strolls over, sees you looking at the stone fragment, and says, "Don't bother trying to read it. That piece of rock's older than your grandfather's lies." Then he spits, wipes his blade on his tunic, and mutters something about rebuilding the camp latrine. Leadership. You fall back into the reassembled line as the army prepares to hold the field. Archers are setting up behind low mud embankments, and the chariots are parked in a rough circle like very disappointed oxen. A few men are digging shallow pits, makeshift graves, or at least a dignified cover for the worst of the mess. The priests begin chanting from the top of a supply cart, waving palm fronds and invoking the spirit of the steel. They say you've done as Eonatum did, reclaimed the sacred land, punished arrogance, and reminded the gods that Lagash still remembers how to bleed for honor. And yet, as you watch the vultures, actual ones now, circling lazily overhead, you realize that the difference between a legendary steel and today's skirmish is a matter of who survives and who owns a good chisel. You overhear a younger soldier bragging that he was part of the elite flank charge. Another says he personally threw the net and caught 6 men at once. You nod politely and decide not to mention that the net mostly tripped your own squad first. Memory, you realize, is already being edited that a scribe walks past with a damp clay tablet tucked under his arm. He's muttering to himself, shaping lines in his head before he presses them into the surface. You catch part of his draft, and thus the mighty warriors of Lagash, blessed by the hand of Ningirsu, cast down the traitors of Umma and reclaimed the grain-rich plains. You look around at the actual warriors of Lagash, bruised, dusty, sunburnt, and currently arguing over who stole whose waterskin. It's a far cry from divine poetry, but you smile anyway. Maybe every legend begins with people like this, ordinary and exhausted, just trying not to fall face first into canal water. The sun begins its slow descent, casting the battlefield in amber light. The surviving enemy forces have retreated beyond the far ridge, and for now, at least, the land belongs to your side. The commander orders a temporary fortification, stakes, ditches, and a small shrine built from broken bricks and a stolen idol. Because nothing says, "We own this now," like dragging a rival's god into your supply tent. You help gather firewood from the edge of a ruined field. And as you work, you keep thinking about the steel. Not the birds or the blood or even the king, but the act of recording. How someone somewhere decided that what happened on that day deserved to be remembered forever. You wonder what they'll carve about you. Will you be one of the nameless rows in the background? A spear raised, face erased by weather and time? Or will someone scratch your name into clay just once before the floodwaters and conquerors wash it all away? As you settle near the fire that night, you hear another soldier humming a tune. An old battle chant, something about glory, something about beer. Probably the same one they hummed under the real steel of the vultures generations ago. You hum along because you lived through it, and because one day someone might say your name while pointing at a slab of cracked stone in a museum, whispering he was there. You're woken before dawn, not by drums or horns this time, but by the quiet thud of mud against a tent wall and the unmistakable stench of something wet and very unfriendly. Rain, the kind that doesn't pour so much as seep, turning everything it touches into sludge. You blink through the gloom, and for a brief, blissful second, you forget where you are. Then someone sneezes hard enough to knock over a cookpot. Back to reality. You crawl out into the gray morning, sandals squelching in the soft earth. The camp has transformed overnight into a soggy mess. Your commander is already barking orders, and a junior officer is attempting to start a fire using what appears to be damp wheat straw and sheer optimism. It's not going well down a nearby. Soldier grumbles, and now comes the real war, trench foot. You nod in solidarity and wring out your tunic. This morning's mission is less glamorous than yesterday's glory. Hold the captured ground and prepare for a possible counterattack. Because, surprise, the enemy didn't just vanish into the dust. They've regrouped. Scouts report they're fortifying the canal ridge with archers and something new. Defensive walls. You frown. Walls? That complicates things. Not like city walls. You're not marching on Uruk here. These are field fortifications. Temporary, improvised, but effective. Reed fences packed with clay, sharpened stakes in front, and watchtowers built from scavenged wood and prayer. Still under construction, but clearly not their first time doing this. Historians still argue about whether Sumerian military engineers developed true field fortification tactics or whether they simply extended their urban building skills to the battlefield. But one thing's clear today. Those defenses weren't just thrown together. They had a plan, and it wasn't hope the gods show up. As you trudge toward the forward line with a basket of reed stakes on your back, you get your first close look. The walls zigzag, creating kill zones for archers. The towers aren't tall, but they give enough elevation for a lookout to see your approach and signal it with a shout and a wave. Immediately, a volley of arrows whistles over your head. You duck behind a fallen log and mutter something reverent about their aim. Not divine, but close. Back in your camp, the captains hold a quick war council. You're not invited, obviously, but you loiter close enough to hear snippets. We can't assault it directly, too exposed. They've got a clear arc over the canal. Any crossing and we're fish in a jar. We need to draw them out. And then the suggestion comes, one that makes your stomach quietly revolt. A faint maneuver. Send a small unit to pretend to assault the wall, just close enough to make the enemy nervous. The goal isn't to take it, just to distract. Make them think they're winning. Then, hit their flank with the chariots. Guess who's in the small unit? You try not to visibly deflate. You spend the next hour preparing for what is essentially a very theatrical near-death experience. Shields are reinforced with extra hide. Spears are shortened for closer grip. One guy even sharpens the ends of his sandals. No one questions it. You're handed a jar of blue dye and told to paint your face like a storm god. You splash some across your cheeks and immediately regret the smell. It's fermented lapis mud. Not divine, just deeply unpleasant. As your squad edges toward the canal. The priest waves a carved reed and mutters, "May the gods recognize your sacrifice." You're not sure if it's meant to comfort you or eulogize you in advance. The advance begins. You crawl along the edge of the canal under cover of tall grasses and mist. Every breath is shallow. Every heartbeat is a hammer in your ears. The reeds snap underfoot like tiny betrayals. Then someone in the enemy tower shouts that you're seen. Arrows again. One lands so close it schemes your shield and slices a clean groove across the wood. You bite down the shout and press forward. The point isn't to win. It's to be seen winning. You and your team rush the outer wall, banging your spears on your shields, howling like you've lost your minds. One guy even throws a sandal as a taunt. It's oddly effective. The enemy focuses in, firing concentrated volleys. They think this is it. And that's when you hear the rumble. Not thunder, chariots. Your chariot corps? Yes, those rickety carts of chaos has swung wide, kicking up a curtain of dust and debris. You can't see much, but you hear the enemy shouting. Their formation breaks. They shift toward the flank. And just like that, you fall back. The feint worked, you slide down into the mud, panting, soaked, but alive. The arrow storm lightens as the defenders scramble to cover their exposed side. One cart plows through their outer pickets, and suddenly, their neat little field fortifications don't seem so clever anymore. That be why sunset. The canal bank is quiet again. The walls still stand, but they're thinner now, pierced in places, burnt in others. The enemy has pulled back another half-mile, leaving behind smoldering stakes and a few unlucky defenders now tied to your side's ration cart. You return to camp like returning actors after a wild play. People slap your back. Someone hands you dry dates. The sandal thrower is now a legend, retelling his moment like it was divine inspiration. As you wash off the blue dye in the canal, you think about how quickly structures rise and fall in war. One morning, they had a fortress. By nightfall, it's a pile of soggy sticks, and tomorrow, you'll probably help rebuild it, maybe on their side. By now, you've developed a theory. War is about 50% shouting, 30% sweating, 15% standing around pretending to look busy, and 5% pure chaos. Today is one of the standing around days. After the chaos of the feint and flank maneuver, both sides have retreated to lick their wounds, rebuild trenches, and probably invent exaggerated versions of what just happened. You overhear someone say that the sandal thrower's footwear exploded on impact. Sure it did. This morning, you've been assigned to guard duty, specifically watching over a half-finished supply road while other soldiers transport crates of grain, spear shafts, and what you sincerely hope is not preserved goat intestines. The road is a recent addition, and that alone tells you something important. Your side doesn't plan on leaving anytime soon, and in fact, they're preparing for what the commander calls positional dominance. You and your fellow troops call it dig, build, and wait. It involves trench systems, walls of woven reed and clay, and more wooden stakes than a paranoid vampire hunter. The Sumerians, it turns out, didn't just fight, they settled in. They brought infrastructure to war. If the enemy wouldn't surrender, you just outlast them, cut off their water, or, if you were feeling dramatic, divert the canal system and flood their barley fields. Historians still debate whether Sumerian siege warfare was true siegecraft or just glorified camping with some threatening glares. But the evidence is mounting. They had roads, forward bases, supply depots, and, most incredibly, logistics. You think back to the day's early orders. You were told to protect a convoy of ox-drawn carts, moving jars of preserved beer, dried fish, and copper arrowheads. It doesn't sound thrilling until you realize what happens if that convoy doesn't arrive. No rations, no resupply, no point that a Sumerian army could only function if its logistics held. That meant quartermasters, scouts, water carriers, scribes, and the occasional poor soul responsible for wrangling wayward donkeys. Speaking of which, you spot one now, halfway through chewing its harness and being chased by a breathless teen with more mud on his face than gear. You salute him as he runs past. He does not salute back. The enemy has built their own version of a fortified post across the canal bend. You can see it faintly through the haze, raised platforms, wooden barricades, and the occasional glint of metal. No one fires today. It's a standoff. Everyone's tired, and no one wants to start another round unless they have to die. You're starting to learn the rhythms of war. The build-up, the bursts, the strange silences that, in those silences, you find time to think. Someone asks, why do they care so much about this stretch of mud? You point to the canal. This is more than land. It's water, and in Sumer, water is life. Control the canal, and you control irrigation. Control irrigation, and you control the harvest. Starve your enemies' crops, and you don't need to kill their soldiers. Their gods will do it for you. You remember what the priest said during one of the early marches. The gods bless those who tame the flood and punish those who defy divine order. But really, it's not divine, it's political. The fight for water is a fight for power. Nearby, a group of soldiers is filling clay jars with grain and burying them in small pits. Emergency reserves, just in case the lines break and supply runs are cut. You admire the foresight, or maybe it's just habit. Some of these men have fought this same war 3, 4 times, same land, different year. Point one of them, an old veteran with a crooked nose and too many scars to count, tells you about the time Lagash tried to dig a secret irrigation canal in the dead of night. We thought we were so clever, he chuckles. Then we hit a burial pit, woke the entire camp, stank for days. His story sparks a memory. You've seen clay tablets back home that record irrigation sabotage, accusations carved into baked stone, complete with witness names and divine invocations. Some of the oldest known treaties in Sumer were written to settle water disputes. You're not just standing on contested ground. You're standing on centuries of argument. Back at the road, construction continues. The planners have even marked the new path with baked bricks, some stamped with the king's seal. You smirk. Nothing says temporary war path like official branding. You help a group of workers roll a large pot of dried onions uphill. It slips once. You all yell. It survives. Barely. The joy of ancient logistics, a messenger arrives with a clay tablet, still wet, and a breathless explanation. The enemy has begun reinforcing their southern flank. Your commander nods. Good. Let them dig in. We'll bleed them dry from the river. You're not sure if that's tactical genius or just confident guessing, but everyone nods like it's brilliant. Evening falls with a surprising chill. You sit beside the half-finished road, eating your ration of fig mash and roasted fish. The moonlight glints off the canal, and somewhere in the distance, a flute plays its oddly peaceful for a battlefield. You look at the smooth stretch of new road laid across the mud, and you realize something strange. This war isn't about winning a single fight. It's about staying, outlasting, building something that says, we're not leaving. Even if that something is just a muddy road, 2 reed walls, and a net full of regrets. You yawn, lean back against a crate of pickled lentils, and whisper, may tomorrow be quieter. Someone behind you sneezes again. Oh, probably not. You wake to yelling. Not the panic kind, more the bureaucratic meltdown kind. A junior scribe has misplaced a tally tablet. You roll over, face smeared with dried canal mud, and grumble something about burning all clay in Mesopotamia. No one hears you. Why now? The rhythms of camp life are painfully familiar. You eat what you're handed. You march where you're told. You keep your weapons sharp, your sandals tied, and your expectations low. If something isn't on fire or stabbing you, it's a good day. But this morning is different, because today, your city wants the gods to notice. Word spreads quickly. There's going to be a ritual display, a procession, something about honoring Ningirsu and renewing the strength of the war effort. You try to stifle your sigh. Rituals mean standing still for hours in the heat while men in fancy hats wave sacred branches and chant badly. Still, you show up. Because you were voluntold. The temple staff arrive in full regalia. Robes dyed with rare indigo, high conical hats, and enough perfume to smother a chariot team. They're followed by musicians carrying lyres, flutes, and drums the size of bath barrels. One of them is already playing, poorly, and at the center of the display, a sacred weapon. Not just any weapon, either. It's said to be a replica of Ningirsu's mace, carved from black basalt, engraved with divine symbols, and rarely removed from the inner sanctum. The high priest himself carries it in both hands like it might explode if jostled. He begins to chant, and the lines of soldiers form up around the shrine. It's a surreal blend of battlefield grime and religious theater. You glance at your comrades, half of them still crusted with dried blood and fish scales, now bowing solemnly as a man waves a palm frond in their direction. You've never felt more spiritually confused. Historians still argue whether these battlefield rituals were morale boosters or actual call for divine intervention. Tablets from the time record both. Prayers for victory and curses flung at enemies with the same breath. One record even suggests a general blamed a failed campaign on a forgotten goat offering. Typical scapegoating as the ritual continues. The high priest tells the story of the war god's triumph. How Ningirsu defeated the Anzu bird, a chaos beast who tried to steal the tablets of destiny. The symbolism is clear. You are the divine arm, reclaiming order from chaos. You are reenacting myth in mud and sweat. And if you squint hard enough, maybe it works. For a moment, as the chanting rises and the drums pound in time with your heartbeat, you do feel something. Not divine clarity, exactly. More like unity, purpose. Even if it's just a well-organized illusion. Then the wind shifts and you get a full face of priest perfume. Divine moment over. After the ritual ends, you're sent back to your unit with a freshly smeared protection charm. 3 dots on your right forearm. Supposedly wards off arrows. You consider asking for a refund in advance. The rest of the day is spent preparing for a likely night assault. Not by you, by them. You overhear a scout mutter that enemy fires have increased on the far bank. Something's moving. Something's coming to us. Oh, you dig. Everyone digs. Trenches are deepened, barricades reinforced, and watchfires lit every 50 paces. You smear pitch along the edge of your shield to keep the wood from splitting. You test your axe's edge on a piece of hide. It barely scuffs it. Good enough to, as dusk falls, tension hangs in the air like wet linen. You stand watch with 3 others. One is humming again. Same tune as before, that sleepy march tune with too many verses. You don't stop him. The sound is oddly comforting. Hours pass. Then, you hear it. Footsteps splashes in the canal that a single arrow sails over the trench and lands behind you with a dull thunk. Shouting. Then, chaos. The enemy charges not in formation, but in loose waves, howling and waving torches. It's not a conquest move. It's a distraction. They're testing your lines. You brace as they hit. Your shield takes the first blow, a club. You swing wide, feel contact, and someone grunts. Another tries to leap the barricade, and your unit pulls him down like wolves on a deer. The attack lasts minutes, maybe 20. It feels like hours. Then, suddenly, they pull back, retreating into the darkness like phantoms. Your captain calls for no pursuit. They want to probe our strength, he says, panting. They found it. You slump against the trench wall, catching your breath. Then, one of the archers points toward the canal. Look, floating downstream in the water, torches burning bundles of reeds. Booby traps? Ritual offerings? Psychological warfare? You all stare in silence as they drift past. Little lights, flickering out one by one in the darkness, that a message, maybe doubt or just fear, made visible. You pull your cloak tighter and sit beside the fire. Someone tosses a reed bundle into the flames. It crackles, glows, and collapses. Tomorrow, someone says they'll try harder. You nod and whisper back, so will we. The sun crawls over the horizon like a hungover god, sluggish and unwilling. You wake up stiff, mouth dry, and armor damp with morning dew, or maybe fear sweat. Hard to tell these days. Last night's attack wasn't meant to break you. It was meant to unsettle you. And guess what? It worked at your edgy. So's everyone else. Soldiers jump at every rustle in the reeds. A pair of goats got loose this morning and sparked a 20-man panic. The commander called it a timely drill. You're pretty sure it was just goats being goats. There's no fighting today, yet. But that doesn't mean no action, because now comes a different kind of battle. The battle for morale that you're assigned to what's optimistically called the relief rotation. It's not exactly shore leave, but it's better than spear point duty. You and a dozen others are sent a short way downriver to what passes for a rest zone. A patch of dry ground, a shallow pool, and a single fig tree that everyone treats like it grants wishes. There's even a bard. Yes, a bard. He wears a patched robe, carries a lyre missing 2 strings, and says he once performed for the NC of Umma. No one believes him, but no one cares. He plays anyway, soft, rambling ballads about gods who fall in love with palm trees and queens who challenge demons to wrestling matches. It's nonsense. It's glorious. You sit by the water and soak your blistered feet. The sun is warm, the wind soft, and for the first time in what feels like weeks, no one is yelling. Someone passes around a jar of date beer. It tastes like disappointment and roof tar, but it's fermented, and that's all anyone needs. The bard begins a new tale. This one's about Gilgamesh. You groan. Every bard tells Gilgamesh stories, always with different details, always claiming they know the real version. Still, you listen. He says Gilgamesh once fought a beast made of bronze and fire, sent by the gods to punish men for building too many cities. He says Gilgamesh didn't defeat it with strength, but with kindness. He offered it figs and sang a lullaby. The beast wept molten tears and vanished into the stars. You know it's not canon, but still, something about it makes the air feel lighter. The bard ends his tale with a bow, and someone tosses him a fish spine as payment. He nods solemnly, like it's a royal tip. Historians still argue whether stories like these were based on memory, metaphor, or total invention. But they served a purpose: to make pain poetic and fear manageable. You didn't need truth. You needed something to believe in. A priest joins your group. She's young, probably apprenticed at a temple before being dragged into war service. She carries a small pouch of amulets, clay, shaped like tiny lions, stamped with divine symbols. Protection tokens, she says, against death and dreams. You take one, tie it to your belt. It smells like ash and rose oil. You hope it works. In the distance, a horn sounds. Not urgent, just a recall. Rest period is over. You rise, stretch, and dump the last of the beer onto your feet. A soldier calls that blasphemy. You call it exfoliation. Back at the main camp, something's changed. The scouts have returned with news. The enemy has abandoned a forward post. Not fled in panic, just pulled back. Deliberate. Strategic. Your commander isn't celebrating. They're drawing us in, he mutters. They want us to take the bait. And we will. But we won't swallow the hook. So a new plan is drawn. Advance, but cautiously. Reclaim the empty post. Fortify it. Hold it. No pursuit, no recklessness. Just quiet pressure that you're part of the first group sent to reclaim it. You cross the old canal line under a sky that feels too still. Even the birds are quiet. The path is dotted with abandoned cooking fires, broken sandals, a few smashed jars of pickled onions. You grimace. You knew someone who liked those. You reach the post without incident. It's eerie. The walls are intact. Spears still stacked neatly. A game of knucklebones abandoned mid-dash throw. It feels less like a battlefield and more like an eviction. You help resecure the perimeter. New watchfires are lit. A shrine to Ningirsu is hastily built from bricks and a stolen goat skull. You toss your last date pit into it for good luck. That night, a different kind of silence falls. Not fearful, not expectant, just waiting, and somewhere deep inside, you understand, this war isn't just swords and skirmishes. It's the slow war, the creeping kind, the one that eats time and erodes patience. A chess game in the mud. But for tonight, you rest. You press your amulet to your lips, breathe deeply, and look up at the stars. Those same constellations that Gilgamesh was supposed to have wandered under long before armies and walls. And you wonder if he ever just sat and thought, I'm tired of all this. Because you are, but you're still here, still in the game. And tomorrow, you move again. You're starting to forget what day it is that in '01 says the date anymore. There's just before the net attack, after the goat incident, during the fig beer disaster, and the night we thought a tree was an assassin. That's the new calendar now. But you do remember this. Today, you're marching again. This time, it's not a skirmish force or a feint. It's a full relocation. Your commander has decided it's time to move the entire position forward, to capitalize on the enemy's withdrawal and claim the Central Canal Ridge before they can retake it. The field post you reclaimed yesterday, that's now your rear base. So you pack up, not just weapons. Everything: tents, food jars, ritual items, writing tablets, even a shrine goat skull. Someone wraps it and reads like it's made of glass. You're touched by the reverence, or maybe just concerned. The whole operation moves like a sluggish parade. Spearmen lead, chariots follow, and the logistical tail drags behind like the world's least enthusiastic wedding procession. You're somewhere in the middle, carrying a bundle of spear shafts and chewing on dried lentil paste. The march is long and hot. The mud pulls at your sandals. Insects buzz like they've been hired to ruin your morale. But you keep going because you're headed toward the canal ridge, a high strip of land flanked by artificial water channels. It's the key. Whoever controls the ridge controls irrigation flow. From here, the enemy can't divert water from your fields, and you can deny access to theirs. Simple strategy. Brutal consequences. You finally reach it in the early afternoon. The enemy is gone, but not far. Smoke curls from their distant campfires, barely visible on the horizon. You've moved forward, but not beyond danger. The real war is now less than a day's march away. Your new position is promising. Elevated, dry, for now, with clear views on both sides. But it needs defense and fast that you're given a digging tool and told to start shaping earth like your life depends on it. Because it does. The orders are to build a zigzag trench, not a straight line. Why? Because straight lines invite arrow volleys. Angled trenches give cover and confuse attackers. It's basic Sumerian field wisdom, and you're suddenly grateful someone invented geometry. You dig, and to some point, your blisters develop blisters. A beetle walks across your hand, looks you dead in the eye, and keeps going. Even the wildlife is unimpressed. By evening, the trenches are halfway decent. Short ramparts are added, baskets filled with clay and reeds, stacked to absorb impact. Some of the elite units even shape hardened clay bricks with stamped seals for the central wall, that it's not just defense, it's propaganda. Every soldier who sees those bricks knows this land now belongs to your city. It's subtle, but powerful. That night, the commander calls a small meeting by the fire. You sit on a damp rock, watching smoke hurl into the dark sky as he lays out the next phase. We hold the ridge, and we remind them we're not leaving. Simple words, not a flashy speech, but they settle like a stone in your gut that you're not leaving. You look at your surroundings, a half-built trench, a pile of broken tools, a priest trying to figure out how to face the makeshift shrine eastward when the sun clearly refuses to cooperate. This is your world now, and strangely, it's starting to feel normal. The next day brings another surprise. The enemy sends an envoy. Yes, an actual messenger. He arrives under a white reed flag, escorted by 2 guards with very smug mustaches. He's short, dressed in spotless robes, and looks like he's never lifted anything heavier than a stylus. You watch as he's brought to the commander's tent. You don't hear the conversation, but you do hear the envoy's laughter at one point, and later, the sound of clay tablets being slammed onto a table. Eventually, he leaves, and the commander emerges, holding a small scroll and a scowl. They want negotiations, he announces, or distraction. You raise an eyebrow. Could be either. Historians still debate how formal Sumerian battlefield diplomacy really was. Some say it involved complex ritual greetings, animal sacrifices, and shared meals. Others argue it was mostly posturing, sending messages just to buy time or confuse opponents. Whatever this was, your commander doesn't buy it. But he's not dismissing it either. Instead, he sends your scribe unit to prepare tablets for response. You help them gather supplies: fresh clay, reed styluses, sealing wax. You've seen these scribes work before. It's half calligraphy, half drama. Every phrase is crafted with sharp intent. Lagash does not retreat, they write, and the gods have favored us with the ridge. Also, your canals have weakened. Ours flow strong. You smirk at that last one. Passive-aggressive hydrological insults? That's classic. The reply is baked in a travel kiln and handed off to a scout who disappears into the dusk. It'll take 2 days for a response. If one comes in the meantime, you dig more trenches, more walls, more foundations for something you hope resembles permanence. One soldier asks, What happens if they say yes? You shrug. Then we pretend we were always interested in peace. Another asks, and if they say no, you glance out at the fields, already filled with small watchfires. Then we fight again, this time from the high ground. The trench is finished at last. You sit at the edge, watching the moon rise over the water channels, casting silver ripples that look almost peaceful if you forget everything they've cost, and you whisper, "We hold the ridge," because now it's yours. You don't sleep much that night. Maybe it's the wind, maybe the slope of the trench, or maybe it's the fact that you're now officially entrenched in the most contested scrap of land this side of the Tigris. Either way, you lie there, staring at the stars and wondering if the enemy's envoy is actually sleeping in a soft bed with clean water and figs probably. That smug little scroll deliverer. But before dawn breaks, your answer arrives. Not from the stars, but from the northern horizon, a scout returns, breathless and bloodied, collapsing into your camp with just 4 words. They're building a dam. You sit up, no, that can't be right at a dam. But sure enough, within the hour, another scout confirms it. The enemy has begun redirecting part of the upper canal, piling reeds and clay to cut off a vital flow into your side of the ridge. They're not attacking directly. They're weaponizing the water. If they succeed, your irrigation dries up, your fields crack, your cattle die, and your forward position becomes a glorified puddle of dust. You join a rapid response team. The priest blesses you with another clay amulet, this one shaped like a fish to encourage water to flow in your favor. You don't bother asking what that's supposed to mean. You march northeast under a blazing sky, passing cracked fields and sluggish tributaries. The canals here have been slowly redirected over years, maybe decades, in a quiet war that never really stopped. Now it's just louder by afternoon. You see it, a half-formed mud dam, guarded by only a few enemy laborers and spear carriers. It's still small, but growing. Your captain huddles your unit behind a rocky berm. "We strike now," he whispers. "Break the wall before it forms." Simple plan. No backup. Minimal subtlety. You charge. You splash through shallow water and flailing reeds, yelling loud enough to scare the fish. The workers scream and scatter. The guards fumble into position but barely hold. You clash near the base of the dam, really just a muddy bulge at this point, and swing wildly. You knock one man into the canal with your shield, and he vanishes with a soggy shriek. A spear grazes your leg. Not deep, but enough to sting. You ignore it and keep moving. Someone behind you sets fire to a reed bundle. The flames climb fast. Moments later, the dam is no more than a smoking, crumbling mess of blackened stalks and boiling frogs. A small victory, but a loud one that the remaining guards flee north, and your team regroups by the smoldering embankment. You're breathing hard, soaked, bleeding slightly, but upright. Good enough. You dig a quick trench and push water back into its original channel. It's primitive canal repair. Sloppy, ugly, but effective. For now, historians still argue whether these types of sabotage missions were common practice or rare acts of desperation. There's little written record. Clay tablets are better at listing taxes than midnight dam raids. But oral traditions speak of water battles, fought not with spears, but with reeds, shovels, and sheer stubbornness. Back at camp, the commander praises your team and orders extra rations, spoiled barley bread and lukewarm broth. You toast with it anyway. Victory tastes like mildew, apparently. The mood in the camp shifts. The failed dam stunt signals something big. The enemy is desperate. They're trying to win by tactics, not force. That means they're either planning a retreat or something worse. Your suspicions are confirmed the next morning that a runner brings news from the southern flank. The enemy has moved their main chariot division into position. That's no small thing. Chariots are costly, fragile, and reserved for major strikes. You've seen them before: wooden frames, spoked wheels, pulled by donkeys or horses, depending on wealth. Armed with spearmen or archers, they hit like thunder and vanish like smoke. You steel yourself. This ridge, you realize, is about to become the center of a full-scale assault. The commander calls for reinforcement from the rear camp. Messengers are dispatched. Black flags are hoisted. Priests triple the offerings. Even the bard gets serious, tuning his lyre for a dirge. You spend the day fortifying. You add height to the ramparts, pack wet clay into shield gaps, and plant sharpened stakes along likely charge paths. Every spear is checked. Every slingstone counted. The scribes write out final declarations of valor, just in case. You don't talk much. Everyone knows what's coming as dusk settles. The air feels thick, not just with dust, but expectation. Like the sky is holding its breath. The priest approaches, holding a jar of blue dye and a reed brush. She asks if she can paint a symbol on your shield. You nod. She draws a simple image, a swirling river, coiled like a snake. So water flows with you. She whispers. You glance at the canal, quietly humming beside you. You hope it's listening. Then you take your position on the ridge wall, shield raised, spear upright, heart drumming a rhythm older than language. Tomorrow, the chariots come. But tonight, you watch the stars, count your breaths, and whisper one last joke to yourself. Should have joined the fishmongers. The morning is wrong. You feel it before you even open your eyes. The air is thick, not with rain, but with intention. Like something big is pressing down on the land, coiling in the dust and reeds, waiting to spring. You sit up, grab your spear, and scan the horizon. There they are, chariots, dozens, lined up just beyond the far canal, glinting in the morning light like skeletal beasts. Their spoked wheels glimmer gold and red, some wrapped in bronze bands. Donkeys bray and stamp the ground. A thin dust cloud rises behind the mass, swirling into the sky like a signal to the gods. Today, we ride that you're not ready. No one's ever ready. The horn sounds, low and grim. You take your position along the ridge trench. Your squad leader, a man who's chewed more bark than food, mumbles something that sounds like a prayer and a curse at once. Everyone grips their spears tighter. Then they move. The chariots don't charge all at once. No, these are veterans. They know to stagger. Groups of 3 or 4 at a time, forming arcs like scythes across the field. Dust flies. Wheels creak. Spears glint. They're beautiful in a terrifying, gut-emptying kind of way. Point 1 arcs left, toward your side. You duck behind the trench wall just as the first volley of javelins comes. They whistle past like angry insects. One lands inches from your boot. Another hits a reed post, snapping it clean. Then the chariot crests the ridge. You stand, hurl your own spear, and miss, but not everyone does. A stone from a sling hits the charioteer square in the chest. He tumbles backward off the cart, limp as old rope. The donkeys panic, veering hard. The chariot smashes into a spike trap and explodes into splinters. You flinch. Someone cheers, but that was just one. More come. The second wave is heavier, twice as many, tighter formation. They're not just probing now. They're trying to break your line. You brace. Chariot wheels screech as they hit the slope. Donkey hooves dig into the mud. Arrows rain down. You raise your shield. One punches straight through the top and lodges near your elbow. You grunt, rip it out, and keep moving, Historians still debate how advanced Sumerian chariot tactics really were. Some say they were mere platforms for archers, loud, fast distractions. Others argue they were proto-cavalry, devastating shock units capable of cracking even reinforced lines. All you know is this: they're loud, fast, and trying very hard to run you over. A chariot crashes near the far trench. Its archer survives and draws a knife, but a spearman from your unit drops him with a clean jab before he can blink. You nod in appreciation, then return to fighting. The chaos lasts for what feels like forever, but it's probably 15 minutes, and then, like a dust storm blown out, it's over. The chariots retreat, not defeated, just measuring. They've seen your defenses. They've tasted your discipline, and now they fall back, likely to regroup, maybe to invent new tricks. You pant, staring down at the field. The air smells like blood, sweat, and scorched wood. Point one, the chariots burns where it crashed. Donkeys long gone. One will spinning lazily like it hasn't gotten the memo that you're still alive. Some of your friends aren't. The bard is missing. The grumpy spearman is lying on his back, muttering about figs. A priest is giving last rites to someone you don't recognize. You don't ask their name. There's no time. Because just as you think the worst is over, the real attack begins. Infantry. Columns of them, coming from the west and south. The chariots were a distraction. Classic. You scramble to reset positions. Arrows are distributed. Water skins passed around like relics. The scribes pull back behind the wall. You give a nod to the goat skull shrine. You're not religious, but you'll take any help today. The infantry comes fast. Spearmen, axe wielders, slingers, all pushing up the ridge in brutal waves. They shout slogans. Some call you names. Others chant the name of their city god. You respond with a volley of stones. The first clash is thunder. You jab. You parry. You duck. You step on something that squelches. Hopefully a melon. Hopefully, you fight like you've never fought before. Not for honor. Not even for victory, but because this ridge is your everything now. It's your home, your sweat, your friends, your only place in a world gone sideways. Your spear breaks. You grab a fallen one and keep swinging. Someone tries to leap the trench. You push them back with your shield. Another comes behind. Your comrade saves you. You nod your thanks. There's no time for words. Eventually, slowly, the attack falters. Your enemies pull back, exhausted, dragging the wounded. The field is littered with bodies and broken spears. The sun is high. Your mouth is dry. You're too tired to move, but you've held. Again, you collapse against a crate of discarded arrows and stare up at the sky. It's blue. Unbothered, mocking, and somewhere in the silence, a soldier nearby mutters, "We're still here." You nod, yes, you are. Your ears ring long after the shouting stops. The battlefield quiet is worse than the noise. It leaves space for the ache to crawl back in. Your fingers twitch involuntarily. You're not sure if it's shock, fatigue, or just leftover adrenaline. Probably all three. You lie in the trench, not quite asleep, not quite awake. Someone presses a wet cloth to your forehead. Another hands you a cracked jug of barley water. It tastes like regret, but at least it's wet. The chariots have retreated. The infantry has limped back to their side of the canal. But no one's cheering, because everyone knows this was just the first real blow, and both sides are still standing. The camp is a hive of movement again. Wounded are pulled from ditches and field treated with ash, honey, and prayers. You overhear a priest arguing with a medic about whether a bone should be set or left to let the divine winds settle it. The priest wins. Of course, someone walks by carrying a bag of ears. You pretend not to notice. Instead, you focus on rebuilding your part of the trench wall. You wedge split logs and compact earth by hand. No tools left. Too many were splintered in the last wave. Your arm shakes as you push the last plank into place. You whisper, "Good enough," and slump against it. And then the runner arrives. He's soaked, barefoot, and babbling. It takes 3 tries to get his message clear. The enemy is out of food. Your side scouts have intercepted a supply runner from the enemy camp. Inside his pack, 2 loaves of dried barley cake, a prayer tablet, and a note. "We are starving. The gods must act soon." It hits the commander like a blessing. He raises both hands and declares, "We won't need to fight them again. We'll wait." And just like that, the strategy shifts to no more charges. No more daring counterstrikes. The war becomes a game of pressure, of attrition, of watching their camp slowly shrink into submission. You dig in even deeper. Every day, you extend the trench. Every night, you watch their fires flicker and fade a little more. You know their ration carts aren't coming. Your supply lines still flow, barely, but enough that IT becomes a strange kind of war. Not with swords, but with staring contests. You can see them. You can smell their fires. Sometimes you even hear them sing low, sad hymns to their gods. One evening, you hear laughter. Not triumphant, more like the brittle, exhausted kind that comes when someone remembers a joke too late. You find yourself wondering, how different are they really? They're tired. You're tired. They're defending water and land. So are you. And yet, here you both are, sleeping in ditches, cursing insects, and hoping the sky doesn't decide to drown you or dry you out. Historians still argue whether this phase of Sumerian warfare, what the scribes called the long siege without walls, was a true siege or simply a mutual standoff between exhausted cities. Whatever the term, you know what it feels like. IT feels endless. Past the time. You make small improvements, point 1 soldier carved cup holders into the trench wall. Another builds a small shelf for personal tokens, lucky beads, carved fish, bits of obsidian. You add your little lion-shaped amulet. It still smells faintly of burned incense and wishful thinking. Point 1 day. The commander announces a new policy. No more direct confrontations unless provoked. He claims the gods have whispered it to him. You suspect a strategist whispered it first. Either way, it means more watching. You spend your days memorizing the shape of enemy tents, the rhythm of their camp drums, the pace of their patrols. You notice when they stop repairing their east flank. You notice when their sentry fires shrink from 6 to 4, that you even name one of their guards, Lefty, because he walks with a limp and always carries his spear in his left hand. You pretend he's annoyed about it, that he mutters curses when no one's looking. It makes him feel real. Then one morning, Lefty is gone. You don't see him for 2 days. When he returns, his leg is bandaged and his posture is different, slumped. No spear. You say nothing, but you watch closer now, because small changes mean big things. And sure enough, a few days later, a signal torch goes up in the enemy camp, 3 short bursts, then silence. That you've seen this before. It's the prelude to internal negotiation. They're not just deciding how to fight you. They're deciding whether to keep fighting. Your commander notices too. He doesn't smile, he just tightens his robe and says, "Keep your gear close. We may witness something rare." That night, a priest from your side, an older man with a voice like gravel soaked in honey, stands on the ridge and shouts toward the enemy camp. "Let the gods decide. Surrender your claim. Keep your lives." There's no response, but the next day, more than half their tents are gone. Packed up, vanished, no fighting. No blood, just silence. You want to cheer, but no one does. Everyone is too stunned, too wary. Victory doesn't always come with trumpets. Sometimes it arrives with quiet absences. And so you sit again at the ridge, staring at the ghost camp across the canal, wondering if it's really over, or just a pause. You press your lion amulet, still warm from the sun, and whisper, "Don't come back," because you're tired of fighting, even when you win. The enemy doesn't come back the next day, or the one after that. First, you're suspicious. You think this is a trick, that they're hiding just beyond view, waiting to spring some last desperate ambush. But then the third sunrise brings only silence, and the fourth brings birds nesting in what was once their supply rack. That's when it starts to feel real that you're still not officially told it's over. The commander remains tight-lipped. The priests murmur about watching for omens, as if one more cloudy sunset might reverse everything. But the absence is undeniable in more chariot wheels rattling in the dark, in more smoke from unfamiliar fires. Just you and the trench and your side of the canal, still wet, still flowing. That it's the smallest of victories, but you feel it everywhere. In the way the soldiers talk louder now, in the way someone finally takes the time to fix the bread oven, in the fact that, for the first time in weeks, you sleep a full night without clutching your spear like a teddy bear made of oak and feared out of course. That doesn't mean things return to normal. There's no normal in post-conflict cleanup. That's a whole new kind of battle that you're assigned to canal repair duty, which sounds relaxing until you realize it's basically mud wrestling with gravity. You spend your days patching broken banks, dredging block sections, and redirecting sluggish water with a mix of shouting, prayer, and big sticks. Somewhere during all this, you get stung by a wasp hiding in a tool pouch. The medic gives you mashed garlic and says, "It will confuse the swelling." You don't know what that means. You don't ask. Between the sweat and sunburn, though, something strange begins to happen. You feel proud. This place, the canal, the ridge, the clunky walls and spiked traps. This isn't just a war zone anymore. It's a landscape shaped by your hands, your blood, your mistakes and bruises and bad jokes. You notice others feeling it. 2.1 guy start a trench side garden with some sprouted barley. Another sculpts a tiny clay statue of a donkey and names it Victory. It's ugly. You all love it. That a scribe composes a hymn to the god Enki for sparing the waters. He recites it each morning while balancing on one foot, claiming it improves memory. You're skeptical. He forgets the words halfway through most days. But the point is, life doesn't just go on, it grows. Still, historians argue about this part. Some claim the end of these conflicts brought only brief peace before the next power-hungry ruler stirred the pot again. Others believe certain stretches of post-war collaboration did emerge. Short-lived agreements to maintain shared canal routes, to return boundary stones, to stop stabbing one another over cow theft. You're not a historian, though you're muddy, tired, bug-bitten human who just wants one night without rice gruel and one day without stepping on a snail with your bare foot. You do, and it's terrible. One afternoon, a messenger arrives, not from the battlefield, but from home. He carries a wax-sealed tablet and a sack of supplies, cloth, dried figs, and, shockingly, a letter addressed to you. Your hands shake as you open it. It's from your brother. He says your field has started growing again, thanks to the restored water. The cattle survived the dry season. Your niece was born last month. They've named her after your grandmother, the one with the wooden spoon and the opinions about everything. You laugh, then cry, then pretend it's just sweat. Someone offers you half a figure. You take it, bite it, and forget how bitter it is, because suddenly this entire awful, exhausting campaign feels worth it. Not glorious, not righteous, just worth it, because the water flows again, and because somewhere out there a baby's being raised on food you fought to grow. Even if she never knows your name, you'll know hers, and that's enough. That evening, the commander gathers you and your squad. We've received word, he says. Boundary lines are being redrawn. A treaty may be signed. No more movement for now. A pause. You may write home. You may ask to return. You glance around. Some cheer. Some sit in stunned silence. Others, like you, simply nod that you're not sure what comes next. Maybe you're not going home yet. Maybe you'll be reassigned to another trench, another mud heap, another not quite battle with another not quite enemy. But for now, you've held. And that's something. You walk the ridge one more time, slow and quiet, feeling each stone under your feet. The canal murmurs beside you, steady and cold. IT doesn't know who WON, IT doesn't care. IT just flows, and you, for once, flow with it. You stay, not because they order you to, not because you're trying to be a hero. You stay because someone has to mind the canal. The soldiers with families, injuries, or promotions head home first. They look different already, cleaner, somehow just by proximity to the idea of leaving. You envy them and pity them in equal measure. Home will feel alien now. The sound's too quiet, the food too soft, the walls too thin. You sign your name on the rotation list as available for reconstruction. The scribe doesn't look surprised. You join a small company of war-worn holdouts, a weird band of engineers, farmers, scribes, and ex-spear carriers now wearing tool belts instead of armor. You joke that you're a reclamation unit, but the official name is more poetic, keepers of the flow. You almost roll your eyes, almost, because really that's what you've become. No longer destroyers, just guardians of mud and water. Your job is less glamorous than it sounds that you're assigned to canal surveying, which mostly means trudging knee-deep through silta runoff with a crooked reed pole and a clay tablet to record depths. You take notes. You draw crooked maps. You argue with frogs for space. Sometimes, villagers from nearby hamlets approach. They offer dates or fish or just questions. Is the war over? Can we plant near the canal again? Did you see any gods? You try to answer gently. You say the gods were busy. You say planting is okay. You say yes, the war is over, at least here. You don't mention the nightmares. One night, you dream that the canal dries up again and reveals not sand but spears. So many spears, tangled and rusted and growing like wheat. You wake up cold at in daylight. It's easier. You find moments of beauty. One morning, A heron lands beside you and just stares. Not afraid, not impressed, just present. It stays a full minute, then lifts off without a sound. You whisper, "Thanks," like it did something kind. Historians still discuss whether Sumerian soldiers truly became long-term civil servants during post-conflict peace. Some tablets suggest veterans helped repair and manage irrigation systems as a formal duty. Others say it was more spontaneous, practical people staying to fix practical problems. You think it was both. Someone had to care. And weirdly, you do point one afternoon, you and your fellow keepers uncover a collapsed boundary marker, a squat stone with faded cuneiform that reads something like, "This land drinks Lagash's waters by the will of Enki." It's centuries old and likely moved a dozen times by now, but your team votes to reinstall it. Not because it's politically accurate, but because it feels like a promise. The flow is protected again. The local priest leads a simple rededication ritual with barley, oil, and a very confused goat. You clap. The goat bolts. Everyone laughs. Later, a scribe records the day's work with a flourish. Canal segment 43. Depth restored. Flow consistent. Frog volume moderate. You ask if you can add a line. The scribe hands you the stylus. You carve slowly and carefully. Also, nobody died today. It was good. They don't erase it. The days bleed into each other. The seasons shift. The floodwaters arrive early this year. More than you expect, less than you fear. You dig diversion channels and sleep in wet sandals. You build up embankments with baskets of crushed reed and prayer. You get used to the smell of algae and clay, of wet leather and crushed juniper. You get used to being sore in places you can't name. You get used to not flinching at every bird call. One night, as you're walking back to your tent, really just a mat under a fig tree, you hear music that it's not a battle horn, not a ritual chant, that it's a flute. Simple. Wandering. Maybe a tune from someone's home city. You follow the sound until you find a younger worker seated on a rock, playing with his eyes closed. He stops when he hears your footsteps. You say, "Don't stop." He smiles, keeps playing. You sit beside him, and for a long moment, the world doesn't need anything from you and no defenses. No decisions, no dirt, just a melody that's been waiting years to breathe. Eventually, the flute pauses that he asks, "What will you do when it's finished?" You shrug. When what's finished, he gestures around. The canal, the trench, the constant fixing of things that break again tomorrow. I don't know, you admit. Maybe break something on purpose, just to rebuild it slower. He laughs, not mockingly, like someone who understands. You lie on your back and watch the stars slide overhead, and you realize something, that you're not waiting to be a soldier again, that you're not waiting to go home, that you're already somewhere. Somewhere muddy, messy, and slightly improved. And that's okay. You never really expected a monument. And yet, one morning as you're checking for silk clogs near a bend in the canal, you find a group of priests and scribes debating over the exact shape of a stone tablet. A T first. You think it's another boundary marker. But no, this one is different. Taller. Smoother. Someone's already painted draft inscriptions in wet clay. Names, city emblems, and in larger script, a phrase that makes you squint. Victory through patience. The ridge and the flow. You nearly laugh. Then you realize your name might actually be carved into this thing. Someone nearby confirms it. "Yeah," says the pot-bellied scribe, balancing two styluses behind his ear. They're including everyone who didn't abandon post after the main battle. You blink. Even canal repair? He shrugs. Especially canal repair. That's the part that lasted. You step back and look at the still blank section of stone where your name will go, maybe next to someone whose face you recognize, but name you've forgotten. Maybe next to the guy who played the flute under the fig tree. You think, well, that's absurd. And then, okay. Not terrible that in truth. The Sumerians were fond of these public records. Not just for kings or gods, but for things like grain deliveries, market prices, and the occasional military civil achievement. Historians still find these tablets baked into temple walls or buried under heaps of discarded building bricks. One particularly strange example lists both a victorious army and the recipe for a barley stew used to feed the workers afterward. You hope your monument skips the stew part. The priest overseeing the engraving calls for everyone involved to write a short line of gratitude to be carved in miniature along the border of the monument. That you're not a poet, but you scribble, "We waited. The water returned. We stayed." It gets approved without edits. Later that day, a runner from the city arrives bearing news from the temple councils. They've decided to formally annex the canal ridge and declare it protected under joint stewardship between the military, the priesthood, and, shockingly, the local farmers. This is new. You sit with the commander that night. Yes, he's still around, just older and quieter. And he explains what that means. It means this war ended with a shared mudflat and a lot of paperwork. You both laugh. But there's truth in it. The fighting may have made headlines back home, or whatever counts as headlines on clay. But it's this, the quiet rebuilding, that seems to be winning hearts and minds. Villagers begin trickling in from the edges of the floodplain, many returning for the first time in years. You help them check field lines. You show them which trenches are safe to walk. You help translate old field tax codes, half in crumbling Akkadian, half in local dialect. One woman, a matriarch of 7, presses a carved bead into your hand and says, "Thank you for not leaving." You don't know what to say, oh, you nod, and keep moving that you're eventually asked to train new keepers. Not soldiers, students, sons of merchants, daughters of scribes, a few wayward priest novices who wanted something realer than chanting. You show them how to measure flow depth with a stick and a bit of twine. You demonstrate how to spot a leaking bank. You explain how to listen for frogs, because too few is as bad as too many. They ask why you never went home. You say, "I'm waiting to see the last stone placed." And they don't question it, because by now, you're something between a local legend and a tired uncle. You even get your own seat during council talks, low-ranking but included. You mostly nod and sip water beer while city officials argue about reed tariffs and canal toll rates. One day, a young officer from the north arrives, decked in fresh linen, smelling like plum oil and unearned confidence. That he looks at the trench and sneers. This is what passed for glory? You look at your calloused hands, the stone tablet, the regreened fields, and you say, no, this is what passed for success. He doesn't get it, but that's fine, because you do. Historians, if they ever bother to piece this era together, will probably miss your name. Your face will fade. The clay will crack. Maybe the ridge will erode again, swallowed by time and flood. But right now, the canal flows, and people are planting near its banks again. That's the legacy. Not conquest, not monuments, continuity. That night, someone lights a bonfire. Not a war signal, not a funeral pyre. Just a fire. People gather. There's music, Someone cooks a stew with too much garlic. You eat it anyway. And then, under the stars, someone asks, "What was the worst part?" You don't say the bugs, though that's a contender. You don't say the dreams, though they linger. Instead, you answer, not knowing when it was okay to stop being afraid. They nod, and then ask, "What was the best part?" You look out at the canal, still flowing, still yours, and you say, realizing I already had. You never really expected a monument. And yet, one morning, as you're checking for silk logs near a bend in the canal, you find a group of priests and scribes debating over the exact shape of a stone tablet. And T first, you think it's another boundary marker. But no, this one is different. Taller, smoother. Someone's already painted draft inscriptions in wet clay, names, city emblems, and in larger script, a phrase that makes you squint. Victory through patience, the ridge and the flow. You nearly laugh. Then you realize your name might actually be carved into this thing. Someone nearby confirms it. "Yeah," says the pot-bellied scribe, balancing two styluses behind his ear. "They're including everyone who didn't abandon post after the main battle." You blink. Even canal repair. He shrugs. Especially canal repair. That's the part that lasted. You step back and look at the still blank section of stone where your name will go. Maybe next to someone whose face you recognize, but name you've forgotten. Maybe next to the guy who played the flute under the fig tree. You think, well, that's absurd. And then, okay, not terrible. In truth, the Sumerians were fond of these public records. Not just for kings or gods, but for things like grain deliveries, market prices, and the occasional military civil achievement. Historians still find these tablets baked into temple walls or buried under heaps of discarded building bricks. One particularly strange example lists both a victorious army and the recipe for a barley stew used to feed the workers afterward. You hope your monument skips the stew part. The priest overseeing the engraving calls for everyone involved to write a short line of gratitude to be carved in miniature along the border of the monument. That you're not a poet, but you scribble, "We waited. The water returned. We stayed." It gets approved without edits. Later that day, a runner from the city arrives bearing news from the temple councils. They've decided to formally annex the canal ridge and declare it protected under joint stewardship between the military, the priesthood, and, shockingly, the local farmers. This is new. You sit with the commander that night. Yes, he's still around, just older and quieter, and he explains what that means. It means this war ended with a shared mudflat and a lot of paperwork. You both laugh. But there's truth in it. The fighting may have made headlines back home, or whatever counts as headlines on clay. But it's this, the quiet rebuilding, that seems to be winning hearts and minds. Villagers begin trickling in from the edges of the floodplain, many returning for the first time in years. You help them check field lines. You show them which trenches are safe to walk. You help translate old field tax codes, half in crumbling Akkadian, half in local dialect. One woman, a matriarch of 7, presses a carved bead into your hand and says, "Thank you for not leaving." You don't know what to say. You nod and keep moving that you're eventually asked to train new keepers. Not soldiers, students, sons of merchants, daughters of scribes, a few wayward priest novices who wanted something realer than chanting. You show them how to measure flow depth with a stick and a bit of twine. You demonstrate how to spot a leaking bank. You explain how to listen for frogs, because too few is as bad as too many. They ask why you never went home. You say, I'm waiting to see the last stone placed. And they don't question it, because by now, you're something between a local legend and a tired uncle. You even get your own seat during council talks, low ranking, but included. You mostly nod and sip watered beer while city officials argue about reed tariffs and canal toll rates. One day, a young officer from the north arrives, decked in fresh linen, smelling like plum oil and unearned confidence that he looks at the trench and sneers. This is what passed for glory? You look at your calloused hands, the stone tablet, the regreen fields, and you say, no, this is what passed for success. He doesn't get it, but that's fine, because you do. Historians, if they ever bother to piece this era together, will probably miss your name. Your face will fade. The clay will crack. Maybe the ridge will erode again, swallowed by time and flood. But right now, the canal flows, and people are planting near its banks again. That's the legacy. Not conquest, not monuments, continuity. That night, someone lights a bonfire. Not a war signal, not a funeral pyre. Just a fire. People gather. There's music. Someone cooks a stew with too much garlic. You eat it anyway. And then, under the stars, someone asks, what was the worst part? You don't say the bugs, though that's a contender. You don't say the dreams, though they linger. Instead, you answer, not knowing when it was okay to stop being afraid. They nod, and then ask, what was the best part? You look out at the canal, still flowing, still yours, and you say, realizing I already had. The day finally comes when they tell you to go home. Not ask, not suggest. Tell that a pair of junior officials from a city, fresh-faced, wearing matching cloaks that haven't seen a single day of trench work, arrive with formal tablets. One reads aloud with the forced importance of someone and used a mud. By order of the Central Temple Council and the Military Archive Division, all original personnel involved in the Ridge Conflict Phase 3 are hereby relieved of continued duty and are to be returned home with full honors and one standard ox per family. You blink. Did he just say ox? The other official, clearly the muscle behind this little bureaucracy duo, clarifies, it's symbolic. You get a clay voucher. You can trade it in. Naturally, you look around at the others. Some look relieved. A few smile. One man mutters, about time, and begins packing his hammock without another word. Others, like you, just stand there that you've been here so long. Your body knows the slope of the ridge better than your own bed. Your nose knows the scent of wet reed and distant cooking smoke better than any home hearth. And though you're pretty sure your house is still where you left it, you don't quite remember which side the door opened on. Still, you obey. You pack your tools, your shield, kept for sentimental value, your lion amulet, and a dried stalk of barley from the first regrown patch near the canal. You leave behind your tent. It's really more community property now. And your name, carved in a stone. You board a creaky wooden cart with two others, bouncing down the slope like some awkward parade of veterans no one quite knows how to celebrate. The city greets you with half-hearted fanfare, but a few garlands at a temple acolyte playing a badly tuned lyre. Children wave. Mostly at the ox voucher sign, dangling from your neck, that you're ushered into the central plaza where a high priest greets you with a plastered-on smile and says something like, you return as instruments of divine balance. The land remembers you. The gods are grateful. You nod, unsure whether you're more amused or exhausted. Someone hands you a loaf of fresh bread. It's soft, too soft. You miss the trench-stale flatbread with its occasional crunch of mystery gravel. Later that night, you find your old house that's fine, dusty, intact, still standing. A neighbor's goat has apparently decided the doorway is hers now. You argue half-heartedly, then let her stay. You were never good at winning debates with goats. Inside, your old robe still hangs where you left it. Your sandals are covered in cobwebs. You sit on the floor because your bench feels too formal and stare at the wall for a while. Then you laugh out loud, alone, because it's all so absurd. How you left here full of ambition and came back with cracked heels for new scars and an encyclopedic knowledge of canal sediment. But more than that, how you feel, okay. Not glorious, not rich, but okay. And in ancient Sumeria, okay was practically a divine blessing. You spend your first week reacclimating. You visit your brother. Your niece, now a loud toddler, climbs you like a ladder and announces that she wants to be a canal boss when she grows up. You try not to cry. You meet a few others from your old unit at the market. You don't talk about the worst parts, just the odd parts. The frogs, the goat skull shrine, the time someone tried to cook trench rat and almost poisoned the entire East Wall squad. You laugh, long and loud, that a scribe recognizes you one morning and asks if you'll sit for an oral history tablet. You agree. You even comb your hair. He asks your title, and you reply, Defender of the Water Flow. He writes it down without question. Historians might one day study this period and argue whether the post-war transition was smooth, chaotic, or something in between. Whether peace was truly achieved or simply rebranded. But you know exactly what it was. A pause and a choice to rebuild instead of resent. To maintain rather than conquer. To share the water, however begrudgingly at first. Weeks pass. You return to the canal once, just once, to check on it. They put a gate there now, a ceremonial arch, painted with river motifs and etched with names. Yours is still there. You touch it with one hand. The water gurgles gently nearby. Same as always. You whisper, stay steady. And it does. You head home before nightfall. And for the first time in a long time, your steps feel light. You're older now. Not old, but definitely no longer the eager spearman who once flinched at chariot wheels and tried to fight dust storms with a cloth wrapped over his mouth. Your knees creak. Your back makes a sound like a door hinge every time you get up from your garden bench. You wear sandals more out of ceremony than function. And every spring, when the frogs sing at night, you still wake up thinking you're on canal watch. It's comforting in a way that you've grown into your silence. There's a kind of grace in no longer being needed every second. The canal flows. The ridge is green again. There are new names on the duty tablets. Names you don't recognize, and that's how it should be. Every so often, someone knocks on your door. Can you show me how you manage the overflow at segment 12? Or is this how they brace the trench wall after the southern flood? Or occasionally, just, can I hear the story again? The one with the goat skull and the priest who sneezed during a war chant. You always say yes. Even when it hurts your voice, you've become something between a living monument and a friendly nuisance. Children throw pebbles at your garden gate to see if you'll come out and chase them. You always pretend to be furious. They always shriek with laughter, and still, the canal flows point one morning. You walk down to the water like always. You bring a half loaf of date bread, a piece of old chalk, and your favorite flat rock to sit on. There's a group of young workers nearby, clearing algae from the edges. Their leader sees you and waves. "Want to inspect, sir?" You chuckle. You haven't been called sir in years. You wave him off. "Looks clean from here," which it does. The water is smooth, rippling just enough to catch the light. You can hear birds, frogs, a distant hammer from someone fixing a cart. The sound of things working, of life humming along like a lullaby. You pull out your piece of chalk and write something on the flat stone beside you. Still here, still flowing, still worth it. The stone won't last. Rain will wash it away. But for now, it's enough. Historians still debate whether the Sumerians understood peace the same way we do. Their texts mention calm seasons, yes, but rarely without reminders that the gods could stir trouble at any time. Peace, to them, wasn't an ending. It was a pause between responsibilities. That sound about right that you've never believed in forever, but you've always believed in now. And now, your back hurts, the sun is warm, and your fingers smell like chalk and date bread that a shadow falls across your rock. It's the young canal leader again. She can't be more than 20, wears her hair tied in a reed cord like she means business. She clears her throat. "Elder? Sorry, but we're reorganizing the tool shed. There's an old spear in there. Carve initials. Might be yours." Your breath catches, you nod. "It might." She hands it to you. The grip is cracked, the wood warped. But sure enough, you're carving, faint but there. You don't remember making it, but you remember using it. You hold it for a long moment, then hand it back. Better someone else use it now. She bows. "We'll clean it up." She walks off, just like that. No drama. No fuss, and you sit there watching her go and realize you're no longer needed. And you're okay with that. Later that week, a small gathering is held near the canal gate for the planting blessing. It's a minor affair. Low chants, sweet smoke, some priest mumbling about Enki's favor while fiddling with his ceremonial scarf. You stand near the back. No one points you out. No one announces your presence, but you feel the flow continue through them, through their hands, their tools, their steady confidence that this water matters, that someone will keep it flowing. And for the first time in years, you feel yourself let go. Not because you're forgotten, but because you're part of the soil now. The story, the quiet foundation others step on without knowing. And honestly, that's all you ever wanted. You walk home slowly that night, the frogs singing around you. You leave your gate open, and you sleep through till morning. You wake up before the sun, old habits, stubborn as ever. But today, something's different. The breeze feels a little warmer, and the sound from the street carry with them that energy only found when something big is about to happen. You shuffle outside in your robe, still tying the sash, and see it. A line of carts, clean and ceremonial, rolling toward the city gate, a tea first. You think it's a military parade. Old instincts flicker, counting wheels, measuring axle distances, checking for weapon racks. But no, these carts are carrying stone blocks. Smooth, marked, carefully padded with reed mats. Some bear inscriptions. Others have space left blank. You ask a passing boy what's going on, that he says they're rebuilding the Southern Canal Shrine, the one that collapsed in the last quake. You blink. That shrine was barely more than a stump when you were stationed near it. Now, it's being resurrected in stone, not for war, not for defense, for memory. You walk alongside the carts for a while, nodding at the workers. One of them, a young man with sawdust in his hair and an enormous hammer slung over his shoulder, gives you a grin. "We use your trench plans, he says. You stare. "What plans?" He pulls a rolled tablet from his satchel and unfolds it. Sure enough, it's your old field sketch. Muddy lines and messy notes like, "Reinforce here or it leaks again, trust me. Don't put food near this corner, ants. Too steep for old men like me." You laugh. It's surreal. Somehow, your doodles have turned into architectural guidance. They'll build the shrine using the trench as a model, reinforcing the base with techniques born not from temple blueprints, but from years of trial and slippery error. There's a poetry in that, divine reverence anchored in stubborn engineering. You follow them as far as the south gate. That's when a familiar voice stops you. It's the commander. Older, whiter in the beard, but unmistakable. He looks you up and down and says, "Still sneaking into ceremonies uninvited?" You grin. "Only the good ones." You sit together on a crumbling wall, watching the carts roll out. He tells you he's now on the Canal Commission Board, whatever that means. Something between a judge and a glorified ditch inspector. He mostly drinks tea and reads reports. Sounds dignified. You say, "Sounds boring," he replies. You watch a cart go by bearing a massive stone fish carved in honor of Enki. You remember the small one the child gave you, still sitting on your shelf next to the barley stalk. The commander nudges you. "You know this? This is the legacy, not the weapons." You nod. "Not the walls." He finishes, "Just the flow." You sit there together until the last cart disappears down the road. You part ways without fanfare. Back at your house, you light a small lamp and take out your old amulet, the lion. The string is frayed. The clay is chipped, but it still smells faintly of trench dust and ritual oil. You place it by your window, facing the east. Then you sit down, take out a fresh clay tablet, and begin to write, not about battle or orders or gods. You write about waiting, about quiet days, damp sandals, and the sound of frogs at midnight. You write about what it means to repair a place you once fought for, and about how sometimes the loudest victories come with no celebration at all. Just the sound of water moving past the roots of a new tree. Historians might never find your tablet. Maybe it gets fired and shelved. Maybe it gets cracked and turned into building filler. But someone might read it. Someone, someday, might understand that true strength, the kind that actually lasts, isn't found in a sharper blade or a louder chant. That's found in a trench held just long enough that a wall rebuilt without being asked at a canal that didn't dry up again. And in the quiet, tired smile of someone who stayed until it was done. You scratch the final words onto the clay with a sigh and a smile. We fought. We waited. And now we grow. Then you set it aside to dry. Outside, the wind shifts. The river hums. In your garden, stubborn as ever, sprouts 3 new barley shoots by dawn. It's planting season again, and your garden won't let you rest. The barley is reaching out in unruly directions. Your onions have grown bitter from the wrong kind of water, and despite your best efforts, the fig tree insists on dropping half its fruit directly onto the path like a slow, sticky ambush. You smile, though, because all of this means things are working. The rains arrived on time this year. The canal floodgates opened in a careful rhythm, one district at a time. You heard no shouting from the grain store. Even the frog seems satisfied. You've stopped being surprised by how many people know your name. A traveling scribe, passing through on the way to Lagash, stops you in the market and says, "You're the one from the southern ridge, aren't you?" The quiet one. They use your notes in the city academy. You arch a brow. "My notes had drawings of fish wearing helmets." He laughs. "Yes, exactly. The students love them. It turns out your trench sketches have been copied, taught, even recited like poetry." You ask why. The scribe shrugs. "Because they were honest, messy, but useful." You buy him a melon and shake your head for the rest of the day. The shrine at the Southern Canal finishes construction 3 weeks ahead of schedule. They invite you, again, to a dedication. You decline at first, but your niece drags you there by the hand. She's taller now, wears her hair in a braid, and speaks like she owns the river. The crowd is small, mostly workers. There's no grand chant, no firework of incense. Just a priest pouring wine into the water and saying, "May this place remain boring forever." Everyone claps. You love it. Afterward, one of the new engineers, a reed-thin woman with sunburnt cheeks and a laugh that could crack clay, walks up and hands you a reed scroll. Inside is a rough copy of your original canal report from years ago, now annotated by students, rescribed on fresh clay, and sealed with a temple stamp that it's been preserved. Officially, you stare at it like it might start singing. She says they want to make it part of the standard training. Basic ridge mechanics. You clear your throat. "That's ridiculous." "Absolutely," she replies. "But it works." You walk home slowly that night, the scroll tucked under your arm like a sleeping cat. You set it on your bench, sit down beside it, and listen to the breeze carry dust through the trees. You realize it's been years since you picked up a spear. You realize you haven't missed it. Somewhere near the canal, a child sings a counting song about the trench builders of old. The third verse includes a man named Old Mud Toes, who may or may not be you. You chuckle. "I should have trademarked that." But it's perfect because all of this, the garden, the rebuilt ridge, the fish amulet still watching from your window, it means you didn't just survive the Sumerian war machine. You outlived it and reshaped it into something useful, something flowing. Historians still bicker over whether the Sumerians truly developed what we'd call civil engineering. Some argue it was divine imitation, copying the gods' irrigation from sacred texts. Others believe it was raw survival instinct. But more recent findings suggest veteran canal workers like you were crucial, not just in rebuilding, but in innovating. That there's even a theory, half whisper, half legend, that the mud protocols came from your team. That someone with trench rot and a stylist changed the way cities thought about water, boundaries, and balance. You'll never confirm or deny it. But you do leave a clay fish newly carved at the base of the shrine the next time you pass it. You don't tell anyone it's from you. Later that week, you wake before dawn, as always, but you don't head to the garden. Instead, you walk toward the ridge, slowly, with your cane, sandals kicking up soft dust. The sky begins to blush as you climb the last familiar slope. You reach the top and look out. The canal still runs, threading the earth like a quiet song. You stand there for a long while. Then you speak, not loudly, not with ceremony, just enough for the wind to catch it. It worked. No thunder, no sign from the gods, just a heron lifting off from the bank and gliding eastward, wing beats smooth as polished stone. You smile, then turn home. You begin sleeping later now, not from laziness, Just contentment, the kind that takes decades to earn. Your dreams are softer. No more shouts, no splashing boots, no endless trench that won't hold. Instead, it's fields again, barley swaying in wind that hums, not howls. You don't wake with clenched fists anymore. The canal continues to whisper. You hear it some nights, even from your bed. Water bumping gently against reed stalks, frogs mumbling their strange lullabies, the wind dragging its fingers across the surface. You think, this is what victory sounds like, not trumpets. Not cheers, just peace. Kept. You no longer check the ridge each week. Others do that now. Some trained by you, others trained by them. The flow is cared for, and it doesn't need your hands anymore. But it remembers them. One morning, you receive a visitor, a scribe's apprentice, barely 15, breathless with nerves and holding a wrapped bundle of clay tablets. He stammers something about a compiled legacy archive, about recording the transition from martial defense to civic infrastructure stewardship, which is the most scholarly way you've ever heard someone say. We're writing down what you did. You offer him a seat that he has. More questions than you have teeth, but you answer them all. You even tell him the goat story. He laughs so hard he chokes on a honey date. You ask if they'll really store all this, if anyone will ever care. He just says, you'd be surprised what people dig up centuries later. You believe him. As he leaves, he bows, not stiff and formal, but grateful. You wave it off with a grumble, then slip him a fig from your garden. It's lopsided and too sweet, like your whole life, really. Later that week, the local temple hosts a ritual that a quiet one. No fanfare, just community folk gathering at the river bend, tossing in petals, thanking Enki for the rains, for the workers, for the water that never forgot how to move. You attend from a hill. You don't go down. Just watched out. A little girl near the front holds a carved fish amulet up to the sky, mimicking a blessing. You recognize the design, copied from yours. You press your hand to your chest and breathe in deep and slow, because now even the wind moves like memory. Historians may continue to argue whether the Sumerian war machine was strong in the sense we call powerful. Its armies were organized, its strategies effective, its chariots fast, if a bit too squeaky. But real strength, true, lasting strength, was in what came after, the part no one sings about, the part you lived, the trenches that held, the walls that stayed, the people who didn't walk away. Your strength wasn't conquest. It wasn't speed or weapons or fancy bronze tips. It was persistence. One reed basket at a time. One repaired bank. One breath in muddy air with no guarantee the sun would rise over peace. You didn't just survive the Sumerian war machine. You outgrew it and made sure no one had to repeat it the same way again. That's more than victory. That's civilization. So now, the ridge is quiet. The trench lines are overgrown, softened by moss and memory. No banners, no footprints, just the slow rhythm of water making its way home. That you're no longer watching over it. But someone is not a hand you once trained, a name you once called, a story you once told. The river bends gently through the same path you once protected. The sun hangs low, lazy in its descent, lighting up the barley fields with a golden hush. Insects drift between stalks. The frogs begin their evening chorus, not urgent, not alarmed, just there, steady, the way it should be. And as your eyes begin to close, you can feel the weight of the years lift slowly, like mud drying from your boots. You hear laughter in the distance. See outlines of clay tablets, half-written and fully lived. It's all still flowing, still safe, still held by those who understand that S.O. wherever you are now, whether you're drifting in a sleep beneath linen blankets or lying back beneath an open sky. Know this, you were the ridge, you were the flow, and you never left it behind. Sweet dreams, trench keeper. The water's in good hands now.